And welcome to a brand new life, to a brand new day, all the way from the wastelands of California. My name is Michael, bringing you the truth, no matter how bad it hurts. I look forward to once again serve you those sounds of salvation. First time listeners, turn on, tune in, and drop out. This is a very different kind of show, a place where we don't feel so alone. Let us chase away the light no matter what you at home choose to believe. I do admire you for your curiosity. For those new in attendance, I'm so glad you found salvation. You will laugh and you will cry. This will offend you. I hope you enjoy the ride. Joining me tonight, he makes his return by popular demand. Mr. Leo Zagami has returned. You might have seen him and heard him on InfoWars, where he is a very popular contributor and published author. Many of his books are considered vital. Very, very vital. And of course, on the second half of the program, we do have another first-timer. Angel Millar will be making his debut. He will be talking to us about his insight on the occult and Freemasonry, and yes, of course, sex magic. Give the people what they want. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me into your hearts and into your minds. Here we are again, on a night like this. Pumping through your speakers like a poltergeist. I am alive again. I'm so glad you're here. Now let's bring in Mr. Leo Zagami. Leo, are you out there?
Yes, here I am.
There you are. What's going on, my friend?
Oh, good. Oh, good. Can you hear me loud and clear?
Loud and clear. I'm sorry about that.
No worries. No worries.
That
So we are
long.
live.
Yeah, we are live and direct right now. And of course, you are out there in Palm Springs, California. And I am out here also in the desert in El Centro, California, not very far from each other.
Ah, that's cool. Where about?
Oh, El Centro.
At Centro. Centro. I've been there.
I'm sure you have. It's way out here, right by the border.
Hmm.
That's pretty close.
Pretty close. Pretty close.
Yeah, but
I have not been down that
that
direction.
far. Right, right.
Uh,
So Leo, how the hell have you been, man?
Oh, good. Oh, good. And of course, thank you for having me on today. I've been promoting my new book, Volume 4 of My Confessions, which is basically a new release, even if we're going backwards with the release, because, of course, the last time probably I was promoting Volume 6 with you.
Yes, you were.
But Volume 4 is a brand new book, which has been published as Volume 4 simply because a lot of people always ask me why Volume 4 was never released in the English language. And in the end, we actually decided to create a completely new book because in reality, my publisher, the other publisher I have, had decided to publish it as Invisible Master, which I think is a book which we probably discussed in the past on your show. And instead, Volume 4 is a completely new book. It's a book called, as a subtitle, American Renaissance 2.0 and the Missing Link from the Invisible World. And it regards the influence of Jesuit spirituality in our society, and also the influence in Freemasonry, in magic, and so it's a rather interesting book, which of course also talks about the now, what is happening in American society and where we are heading. We might either head in one direction with an American Renaissance 2.0, or we can head in the opposite with a civil war. So it's an interesting book, and it's gave me a lot of satisfactions. People are welcoming it also because it had already pointed out on some of the things which, of course, are now unfolding.
Definitely. And of course, Leo, as I prepared for this interview, I went back in time and I was watching videos of you going back to about 2015. And I'm just thinking, wow, Leo has made so much progress through since back then, since 2015. And seeing you now, it's kind of insane.
Well, I mean, as you know, I started my exposure work in 2006, so a few years back.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess that since 2015, we managed to gain momentum, especially because I published finally my books in the English language and started also, of course, collaborating with InfoWars. So I guess these two things have made my popularity rise here in the US, where I now reside. I reside out of a necessity, which is that my books in Europe and in Italy in particular have created a very dangerous environment for me. And the Vatican tried in various ways to dissuade me from publishing these books. But when I actually started publishing them in 2012, I, of course, gradually became unpopular, and I went on their black books. And of
Right.
course, in a country like Italy, which is dominated by the Vatican in every aspect of society, became very dangerous. And I started to get involved in lawsuits. And defamation there is a criminal offense punishable with incarceration, which often ends up punishing journalists who are trying simply to do their work. So in the end, I abandoned Italy, I fled Italy with my wife. We came here to Southern California, which is now my new home. And I'm glad to be here and be able also to work closely with a lot of my American friends. And we have also created on a Sunday on my YouTube channel a show, a very particular show called The Pew, which
Right.
also features Roseanne Barr. And that has been quite successful. We are working continuously on trying to improve the work that I'm doing on my channel, and also, of course, bringing out more books. I'm I'm working also on that, but at the same time, you have to understand that I'm also going through the very lengthy and delicate process of obtaining a green card and possibly also citizenship in the future.
Before I ask you about your citizenship, you have been quite active on your YouTube page. As you mentioned before, you have Roseanne Barr, and that's pretty wild in itself. How did that come about?
I think that my work has been attracting the interest of a lot of important people in the last few years, but most of them have always kept rather secretive about their connection with me. Even in the past, I had the possibility to encounter a lot of people in Hollywood. I, of course, went there the first time in 2014. Because of the work I was doing to research a book on Hollywood and the Illuminati, or the secret societies in general that permeate the Hollywood establishment. And then I met at that point the son of Oliver Stone, Sean Stone, and started a collaboration with him. And then I met many other people, but in recent times it was actually Roseanne who followed my work, and they came up to me and said, well, let's do something together. And I said, that's great. And thanks also to a Jewish friend of mine from New York who now lives in Jerusalem, we got together this show. So that's, let's say, synthetically what happened. I know that a lot of people said it's not easy to deal with Roseanne. Be careful, she's very volatile. I never have any problems. I mean, we are both very professional in the work we do together, but we also are very relaxed because there is not really like a sponsor or an editor or some kind of media person behind the whole thing. It's really an independently established show which wants to dig deep in matters that regard interreligious affairs, but also life seen in both the Christian and the Jewish perspective. So I have representatives from both of these cultures. I also think that with Roseanne, we have found a way to collaborate because we really want people to evolve. We want to give people maybe something new and at the same time challenging, but always, keeping a smile on our face and trying to always make it, when possible, light, even if the topics, of course, are very delicate, because we are treating the Messianic times in the Jewish perspective or the end times in the more Christian perspective, but altogether we are definitely people who have not accepted any compromise. And that's why I am here on this side of the ocean. And then things have gone my way in the sense that since I came here into the US, I found some wonderful people to really work with. I tend not to go too often to Hollywood or to LA because I will be dragged into a reality which is not mine. I tell you the truth. They often tried to do that.
Well, I mean, Leo, I have to butt in here really quickly. You are at the center of it all, being out there in Palm Springs. That's where all the stars are.
Yes, it's true.
You're right in the place.
I'm actually quite lazy, and I have to confess, because in the end, Palm Springs is where they all come anyway. So I don't really have to go anywhere. It's a little bit like I don't go to the mountain comes to me.
That's right.
So I'm very glad that I'm able to start seeing a change in the mindset of people within the Hollywood establishment. You have to understand that I come from that establishment because my grandmother used to work for Fellini and Zeffirelli. I was basically involved since a very young age with people from this kind of environment. I met Rock Hudson when I was like 5 years old the first time. I met people like William Burroughs, Brian Guy, all kinds of people from the art world, from the acting world, and they were all fantastic people, very creative people. But of course, now we are living in a time in which most of the creative collective, let's call it that way, in one way or the other, tends to always be influenced by the Democrats, by the left-wing politics, and so on. So it's interesting now that finally we are trying to reverse this whole trend, trying to create people that are a bit more open-minded. So I think that it is with great honesty for me to tell you, I'm trying to experiment something. I'm not sure we're going to manage to fully realize it, but I think that already in a few months here in the US, I've been able to do some interesting things.
I agree. And just to finish up with Roseanne, to be honest with you, I didn't think she would be that interested in some of the fringe topics you cover. But then after knowing what went on with her recently, it makes me think she's a lot much more open-minded than any of us gave her credit for.
Absolutely. I mean,
right.
You see, here here in Southern California, we have, of course, various, let's say, conservative minded people that are opening up to the possibility of, welcoming a different way for California. I'm talking about people, for example, like Anomaly, Flexus, and so on. I think in my case, I'm bringing also an esoteric aspect to the whole thing, because here I am talking also about the religious aspect, not only the political aspect. And as you know, my studies have always been centered on the Vatican. But at the same time, I have also been very interested in Judaism. So I wanted to understand more about what was behind Zionism or Sabbatean Frankism, which is actually an heresy which has created many problems within the Jewish religion. So for me, it's about understanding and being able then for other people to understand with me these things. And that's why in my latest book, I dedicated a whole chapter into revealing really the secrets of this Sabbatean Frankist heresy that sprang up within the Jewish faith. And you have to, of course, study many different rabbis, but then in the end, you understand that actually there were people that from within sabotaged the Jewish religion, and they aggressively went into practices that, of course, then put into disrepute the whole faith, but also the Jewish people, and they don't have anything to do with it, because in the end, it's a group of heretics who had hijacked, starting with Sabbatai Zevi, who officially converted to Islam in 1666, but in reality he never converted, because all these people had covertly continued to practice this heretic religion, which they are trying to implement, and it's really satanic. It actually has all the basis of everything like sexual magic and Satanism. And so I wanted to know more about it. So I needed to also dialogue more with people of Jewish faith, with rabbis, and with people who could explain me better what had actually happened. I'm very glad that we have created this link, and I must say I have understood a lot, and I have tried to relay a lot in my latest book, because there is things like, for example, Madame Blavatsky, we all know, is the founder of the Theosophical Society.
Yeah.
But not many people know that her master, Max Theon, as they used to call him, himself was linked to the Sabbatean Frankists. And so, and to what is known as the Brotherhood of Luxor that inspired Madame Blavatsky. Because, and then there was also another secret society within Freemasonry, the Asian Brethren, linked to the Golden Rosicrucians, which are linked to the Jesuits, but the Asian Brethren are linked to the Sabbatean Frankists. So then I discovered, thanks to the work of certain academics, the links between the Jesuits and certain deviant currents of Judaism. And at that point, it's clear to me that here there is an attempt to subvert both Christianity with the Jesuits and Judaism with the Sabbatean Frankists, and not only these two religions, because they are trying to subvert all the religions of the world in creating this one world religion that they are trying to forcefully put on us,
Yes.
So now the point is, a lot of people are trying to do interreligious dialogue under this new umbrella that the Jesuits are kind of bringing together, this human brotherhood that they want to put together, which is, of course, has links to certain progressive branches of Freemasonry and to the New World Order, because it's the one world religion that eventually they're going to put under the control of the artificial intelligence, the cyber Satan that we have maybe discussed in the past. So for me to discuss these topics with people who are prepared, and I must say I'm surprised, Roseanne Barr has also written books that people don't know about, that we try also to promote every Sunday during our show.
Yeah.
And they're books that are pretty fascinating. And I must say that in the work that I conduct with Rosanna, she always points out on some interesting elements, which for me are interesting because they enrich my studies. So I'm very glad of collaborating. And of course, in the future, we hope that maybe we can get a bigger audience through maybe I don't know, maybe a radio, TV, whatever. In the meantime, now the Pew is trying to just get rid of the small technical problem, because of course we are, financed by ourselves, and we're trying to do it in a very but I must say
it takes some time, Leo, you know that.
Takes some time, but already from next week we have organized with the son of Roseanne, who takes care of her technical side. We are trying to launch also the Pew on our own YouTube channel, which is another 166,000.
Oh, did we lose you? Oh, there you are.
And then we have other channels that are offered to carry on the show. There is a particular guy who is involved with us from Israel, who has a lot of followers then in Israel, who is very interested in that. It's called Larry Pfeffer, who is one of the members of this Israel office of the Pew that we are trying to set up together with another guy called Dr. Les Glassman, who has himself a very big YouTube channel, which approaches now 5 million views, but has a lot of potential, and it's very followed. So we're trying to improve all this in an independent way, of course. So when you go then, like last time we talked, I remember also in private, I told you that maybe I wanted to do something with the radio, no?
Yeah.
And I think that there is a lot of potential for what we are doing.
Definitely,
here,
yeah.
For doing something for the radio. The problem is that you have to find the right network and the right people to work at the production and get it together. And at the moment, still, maybe people are learning about us, so we want to just conduce this first season of the Pew in this independent way, and maybe later on we will get on something bigger.
For sure, it's all about trial and error. You guys are still new, and you guys are learning along the way, and there will be some technical hiccups, but you will overcome that. And of course, I will be providing you voiceovers for both shows, Leo.
Oh, well, it's always welcome. We don't, you see, the problem here also with the technicality of it all, we still have to really have a proper desk mixer of the whole show and stuff. But I mean,
right.
We will build it up this year. It takes a little bit of time because, like you said, we have to learn. And a lot of us, I mean, if you have noticed, the Pew is conducted by people who are mostly writers and intellectuals. And it's very known that people like this at times have some technical, faults, yes, because they're not really always. We are more on the books. We're more on the books than on the technical side of things. But I mean, I'm sure that, like you said, we will improve, and the rest of the channel is going great. The Leo Zagami show specials and stuff are gathering momentum. We're really astonished how we have broke some news and really reached a great amount of people in a short time, and this is helping a lot because, of course, through the donations that people maybe give me voluntarily through the PayPal donations and through the books, I'm able to finance this very expensive process for me to become American, which is not been easy, which I'm doing, of course, legally, and that of course takes a lot of patience, and in the meantime you can't even work, so it's
Yes, and not to forget the rest of the cast, which I think is pretty incredible. All of you guys are, and gal, are from all over the globe. And you.
Yes, I wanted to put together, you
Mhm.
see, a cast of people who were competent and who were challenging in their own sectors, in their own specialities. So I'm very glad. Like I said, there is half of the panel that is, of course, of Jewish origin with Roseanne Barr and Lowell. And then we have also an office with another couple of people that don't appear on the pew, but collaborate with the content, always in Israel. And then we have, of course, the Christian side of things with a very unusual priest, openly gay priest,
I
who
love
is an
that.
ordained minister.
Yes.
I thought that would be challenging for one reason,
Pretty
because
interesting.
no, because I mean, we have been, people have seen Leo Zagami for years
Yes.
bashing people, gay priests, because they're hypocrite. And I've always said it. I hate hypocrisy. But if you come out in the open and you say it, then it's a different thing. Then I respect you because you have been honest, and I appreciate honesty. This guy here has really gone through a lot because of his honesty. I mean, he could have been a bishop of the Anglican Church. He could have been, or any other church. He could have really gone through, the hierarchy if he just shut up about his sexuality. Instead, he's always been honest, always openly gay, but in an honest way, and I appreciate that. So I wanted to give
Sure.
him a chance.
Of
I
course, of
wanted to.
course.
I discussed this show in detail on how we should blend things together, and he seemed to be definitely the right person, and also intellectually very valid, because he has written now a book published on Swedenborg, and Swedenborg and the Arts, which is Reverend William Perry's latest book. Then we have, of course, John Barnwell from American Intelligence Media, which is also another side of things, and it's of course a website which is very known. People don't know who is behind American Intelligence Media, but there is some very, very prepared people who are very influential. One of them influenced George Lucas in Star Wars, in the making of Star Wars. So, I mean, we're talking about some very influential people. That is Douglas from American Intelligence Media, who is an ex-NSA operative from the National Security Agency, and also ex-Jesuit. And so we have collaborators and people very capable.
Right.
And of course, we are not your average folk, and we try to make it the most interesting possible. But we also try to say that this is an experiment, and we are challenging even ourselves in the making of it all. So we don't really know how it's going to work out and if it's going to work out. But in the meantime, we carry on with the grace of God.
No doubt.
That's how we do it.
Yes, and Leo, it's a good thing that you aren't hateful of the gay community, since you are out there in Palm Springs. They would go after you for sure out there.
No, I can't be hateful, because
No.
I was brought up by my grandmother, who used to work for Fellini and Zeffirelli, especially Zeffirelli, who was openly gay. And when I was born, there was the assistant of Fellini, who was also openly gay. And my godfather, when I was actually baptized in the Catholic Church, was a very famous gay artist, known as the most popular forger in Great Britain. They actually dedicated even shows on Eric Hepburn, who is this guy who forged the biggest artist in the world, and then in the end he mysteriously died, probably killed in the middle of the 90s. And so I could never be, let's say, hateful towards a community which I know so well. And I mean, thanks to the people of my family, I always had a very open relation. But there is one thing that they know, that I'm very critical about certain elements of the community, especially
Absolutely.
those elements
Sure.
that have, I would say, they have exaggerated, and they have also covered for pedophilia, and those elements need to be exposed. And so I have a very good relationship with the LGBTQ community worldwide, but at the same time, they know that I'm very critical about closing who don't reveal their homosexuality, because I think people should be honest, and especially those people who then have, for example, the pedophilia problem. I have a guy I know from the times I used to live in Norway, used to come to the Gnostic Church, which I used to be involved with in Norway, and he was so honest, very Norwegian, I must say. Probably nobody in the world has done something like this. As soon as he had some thoughts of pedophilia in his head, he actually went to the police and denounced himself.
Wow.
This was a case that was very popular and in Norway, kind of like shocked the Norwegian people. And I became friends with this guy, interviewed him. I wanted to know more about, and then he actually helped me, because he helped me bait a few pedophiles, which I was investigating in Italian Satanism, like Dimitri, this Italian Satanist who had the satanic, so he actually helped me later to investigate the Satanist link to the pedophilia community. But the interesting thing was that, I mean, at least I was capable of opening a line of dialogue because of his honesty. You understand?
Understood. For sure.
So it's for me, it's as a journalist, as an author, as somebody who is being brought up. I have been brought up with certain values, and I personally am conservative in my values and my stand in my politics. But I don't think that sexuality should be part of that.
I hear you.
Sexuality is another thing, and I am very glad that you have people like Milo going around and being openly gay and supporting Trump, as well as other people. I mean, I've encountered even here in Palm Springs people. I was quite surprised that from the gay community, that
big community out there.
What's it?
I was saying that's a very big community out there.
Yeah, and I was quite surprised to find people who actually support Trump within this community, even if, of course, a minority compared to the majority, which we hope that one day will open up their senses to the fact that you can't be on the left and endorse the Democratic Party, that is the party that endorses Islam, that throws gays off the roofs. So, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's just the most demented thing. Plus, you have to put in your head that you can't push the LGBTQ agenda to the kids. The children have to be left out of this whole sexuality thing.
And I agree with you on that one.
It's something that I will never tolerate, and I'm always very honest about it. So people know that I have very much this in me. I am a person who can be very open. Of course, I was brought up, and then I started to work as a DJ. I worked in the music business.
You're in the music business.
And of course, I know people,
sure.
gay people, and I have friends in the gay community. I mean, they basically are the best. Some of them are the best artists. You have to be honest about it. But some of them have gone to the dark side and have used even their art in dark ways, and I don't support that.
I hear you. And Leo, do you identify as a Christian or a Catholic?
But you see, the thing is that Catholics still recognize me as Catholic. I was never excommunicated, and people like even church militant who, they're very conservative in their Catholic approach, and they actually consult me all the time. They always keep me in high regard, and they all consider me Catholic. So I was not able to get excommunicated. But these days, to tell you the truth, I consider myself a non-denominational Christian, because I think that the denomination is a limit imposed by man, and that have nothing to do with the real moment, which is the meeting with God and Jesus Christ, which is something personal, that is, a personal matter. So, though I understand that in the past maybe institution could be important to preserve maybe certain directions in the faith, now we are at a turning point in history in which we are completely finding ourselves catapulted, kind of thrown into this end-time scenario, in this messianic era for the Jewish people. And what, you're going to have to limit yourself with a denomination? I'm not part of that. I'm part of something a little bit more higher, because I learned a lot from people that teach me, first of all, to embrace Jesus before embracing any denomination.
I hear you. And Leo, what's your take on the whole craze right now in America? We're seeing a lot of transgenderism in sports going on right now. Lots of lawsuits going on, even in Connecticut. 3 female high school athletes out there, along with their family, filed.
It's always I think this is a continuation of the topic we just touched. When I said that I don't approve of this aggressive promotion of LGBTQ agenda in outside of whatever was their initial. I know very well that the gay community suffered persecution. I remember in the early 80s when I came the first time in New York, it was 1982. I was in Central Park West at my grandmother's apartment, and I met there Quentin Crisp, who was this historical figure for the gay community. And together with my grandmother, they actually made in 1990, I think, the last film that my grandmother acted in, called An Alien in New York, I think it's called. But the thing is that I know that this guy risked arrest numerous times in the 50s and 60s, and he was persecuted. So I understand how the gay community felt about persecution, but you have to understand when to limit yourself, otherwise you go the other way, because then you're trying to impose your own agenda, and that's not really the case. Now they have one, let's say, the freedom to be, and that's great. So I enjoy, their pride and whatever they stand for, but they can't make it a daily event. I mean, here in Palm Springs, they go on for like a month with this gay pride thing. It never ends. 2 months. It's like a never-ending series of events.
So it's 24/7 out there, Leo.
Yeah, well, it's aside from that, I'm talking about the event in itself, the actual public display of the fact that you have liberated yourself. I understand it's important, but it's like American independence. American independence is important, but we celebrate it only one day a year, the 4th of July. We don't need to celebrate every day of the year. Otherwise, we diminish its importance. So I'm glad that this community has now the rights that they have, and they should have these rights. But then they have to understand that you can't interfere in other people's will. When you go in the schools and start teaching transgenderism and rubbish like this, with drag queens teaching to little children.
Yeah, that's sort of that's a little too far, in my opinion. And I think I might have lost Leo there.
Yeah, no, I'm
here. You're here. Okay, good. Yeah, but yes, that's going a little too far, Leo, in my opinion. And I don't support.
Absolutely.
I don't support some of these the whole transgender thing in sports, because it's very unequal for the female athletes out there.
Sports is unequal. I mean, 2 bodies have been made by God as 2 different bodies. You can't go and say because you had maybe a sex operation that you are the same of an ordinary female, or it's just not. It's just wrong. And this whole thing of gender fluidity.
For sure. And
it's just bullshit which is being created to destroy the family nucleus, to destroy those conservative values. You know why? I mean, people think Palm Springs nowadays, of course, is the home of a big LGBTQ community. So that's it. You have to understand, I came here because this is also the home of the Rat Pack, of the Sicilian Mafia. This is the place where people like Frank Sinatra reside.
Oh, yes, of course.
This is a place, a very serious place in those regards. I mean, you have to understand there has to be respect. So I think that they know that there are certain limits that maybe they shouldn't have passed, and I hope that they will go back to be sensitive towards the rest of the community, because they're welcome to go on and do whatever they want, but they are affecting other people, and when they're affecting children, that's intolerable.
For sure. And of course, the Twin Palms Frank Sinatra estate out there, very beautiful location. Of course, Jack Parsons also was someone who stayed out there. So yes, it's a great place. It does hone.
And then of course there is the movie Colony, so it's connected to Hollywood, to whole golden era of Hollywood. And I hope that, and I mean, Sonny Bono was the mayor of this place, but he wasn't a Democrat. I mean, it's like people think Frank Sinatra at the beginning of the 70s quitted the Democratic Party and embraced the Republican Party because he saw where the Democratic Party was going. It was going towards extremism. And now in 2020, in these elections with Bernie Sanders and Buttigieg, we are seeing this extremism. These people are socialists / communist Marxists. They're people who are feeding off the worst ideologies that ever came out of the darkest side of the Illuminati.
It's funny you said socialism. The only good thing socialism has ever brought us, Leo, is the AK-47.
Well,
It's a
of
beautiful
course,
gun.
the great thing about the Russians is that they have always had a lot of brains when it comes down to building a weapon like that. They are absolute genius, but many other things. The problem with the Russian people is that unfortunately they implemented this ideology for so long that has created some very long-lasting consequences. Now, people think because you have the end of the Soviet Union in the 90s, that basically nowadays there is no more talk of communism or all that. But a lot of those people were brought up in communism. A lot of those generations were brought up by the Soviet Union, and they never really changed their ways to Russia as soon as the Soviet Union ended. Because in our family, we even had relatives who had to escape when there was the revolution. So one of the great wishes of my grandmother was to actually go into Russia as soon as there was the possibility. She actually went before me when the Soviet Union was about to collapse, right in that period. And I went immediately after when they called me there, and I started to work with the Russian Ministry of Culture for educating them on the history of music, dance music. At that time, that was my job, and I did a great job. Also, in the radios of Russia as a speaker, I was the first foreign speaker to actually be allowed to have radio shows, which were cultural. I mean, we were talking about art and talking about music, art, and culture in general, and even politics at times. And I must say that I really saw the rise of Putin, and in the end, Russia opted for what they called a form of a democratic dictatorship, because that's what they want. They want a strong man. They don't want this volatile world where, at times democracy becomes, unfortunately, a very volatile world, especially when you have people who abuse it.
I agree.
We have seen often the left abusing it, unfortunately, because they're masters in bureaucracy. It's like Russia. In Russia, still, bureaucracy is the same as in the time of the Soviet Union. I mean, and it's a big machine that never changes. In Europe, bureaucracy, most states, is still this kind of that the states have, and it's always because of socialism and at times communism that you have this kind of mentality.
A quick shout out
leaves everything into the hands of the state. It's what Bernie Sanders wants to do. I mean, it's a nightmare.
We'll talk about that right now, but I just wanted to quickly say shout out to the former fallen Kalashnikov, who of course brought us the AK-47, and of course you mentioned Bernie Sanders, and I'm curious what your take is on Joe Biden and the rest of the Democrats out there. What's your take on these individuals?
Of them, because the Democrats are the product of Jesuitry. I mean, Jesuitism has embedded this whole political arena and has also moved the Democratic Party from a patriotic party into an anti-American party. That is really sad to see. I mean, here we have people like Ocasio-Cortez and her Muslim friends. She, for example, she's not a Muslim, no? But she writes, in fact, for the Jesuits. I saw articles of Ocasio-Cortez for the official Jesuit publication of New York. she is totally in bed with the Jesuits. And she's also chicken brain, because they need people like that. Like they have 2 cells in the brain, and they give them this fake, these fake missions that they have to save the planet because of climate change, all that kind of rubbish. And they have to, of course, worship Greta Thunberg now, because she's the new saint of the Catholic Church almost, even if she comes out of Sweden. And it's really sad to see that this. You see, I went around Europe for many years studying and also, of course, participating to lodge meetings in my capacity when I was a Freemason, member of the OTO, member of various secret societies. I lived many years in Scandinavia.
Right.
And so I witnessed firsthand what it means, Scandinavian socialism. And I wanted to really study it in depth because I wanted to have a first-hand experience. Man, it's a miracle I came out alive.
It really
Behind the
is.
scenes, there are a bunch of Satanists, some of the most vicious Satanists, bloodthirsty, human sacrificing, pagan, fake Christians all the way, and of course allied with Islam. That's why they have welcomed the Muslim invasion, and that's why now there is whole areas of Sweden or Norway, whatever, that are in the hands of these people that actually following the Sharia or in the middle of Europe or in Northern Europe, which is crazy. They do it, of course, also in France, which has a large Muslim population because of the colonies, but they have also literally invaded Scandinavia, which used to be a very peaceful and tranquil setup, bringing everything that is wrong from their countries. I'm sorry to say that. And it was, for me, very sad to see how naive these northern people were in relating with these Arabs or these Persian people from Iran and so on. Because those people are real big-time crooks. And me, I'm half from Sicily, I understand it. I actually have their blood in my blood. You understand? I have this kind of mixed blood. Today I discovered, thanks to DNA research, actually I'm only 39% Italian.
Really?
But I have 6% Portuguese and Spanish blood, and I have even I'm actually over 1%, 1.1% Native American, because part of my family live in South America, so I have also links to the American continent, and I have even links to Eastern Europe. But I am less Italian than expected, but I knew that because, of course, my father was an aristocrat from Sicily, and most of them were not really pure Italians to start with. So I understand that when I see the Scandinavian model of society being literally raped by these people, these crooks, I was like watching it in disbelief. And I was watching disbelief how the Norwegians will do anything to please them.
It sounds like most of the world out there. And by the way, I gotta ask.
But remember that this happened 20 years ago when I was living there, and
True.
so
yeah, you're right.
Then when I finally came out of all that, and I started actually my exposure work when I was still actually married even to a Muslim woman in 2006. So when I came out of all that, I finally could bring my perspective to the table. I think I have a 360 degrees perspective of the whole thing and of the problems that might arise in this side of the world if you do the same mistakes they did over there. So for me to see Bernie Sanders, who wants to implement all the values of Scandinavian socialism here in the United States, well, you can understand that I already seen it and I see how bad it works. People suicide themselves, the highest suicide rate in Europe, in those countries, not only because of the lack of sun, but because of the society that pushes everything down. And you can't, there is a thing that in the whole of Scandinavia, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and all the Finland, they have this mentality that nobody in the society can rise to the level of stardom and can prevail. So everybody has to be kept at a social level, which is the same. It's socialism.
By the way, in the chat room, I could see people chatting about Norway and
Yes.
the band Mayhem. And if you recall, we
Of
talked a little bit
course.
about that last time you were here.
Yes, yes. I actually one of the first reasons for me to go up there in Norway. I was working at the time with Finland, with Russia, with other countries, but in Scandinavia, I heard that Norway was important when, of course, they start burning churches, and I wanted to know more about what was happening.
That's
So
so
then
wild, by the way.
I ended up actually in Bergen, which is the place where all these people came from, and so I met some of their friends, some of their closest friends, and I was able to understand who was behind it in the end. And it was actually, of course, the OTO, the groups like that, secret societies that, of course, were very much active at the time, that were vehemently anti-Christian, and unfortunately, they inspired the burning of these beautiful churches that were 1,000 years old and that will never be recovered because, of course, they were made of wood and they've been set on fire. So that's a loss for the collectivity. And at the same time, though, I saw the negative forces that this Satanism was bringing together was from people who were not really believing in a Satan entity. No, they were completely atheist, and they were using symbols of black magic, the symbol of Satan, and this and that, because they were trying to impose sort of their own do what thou wilt philosophy, do what you want philosophy. And in the end, though, they all came out as losers because, as I said, a lot of these people ruin their lives because you cannot, of course, you don't have to believe in Satan, but he believes in you. And so the best trick that, as you know, the devil has always put in front of is not to believe in him. And so at the moment, if you don't believe in him or you don't believe in his religion, you don't believe in these demonic entities, they prevail. And that society was inherently evil, with people pretending to be one thing and at night doing completely the opposite. It was like an horror movie.
So, Leo, you're not a fan of black metal.
No, I'm not a fan of black metal, but I must tell you the truth. Black metal popped up because of this reaction. These groups like the OTO have built a very strong following in the 80s, and especially in places like Bergen and Oslo. Bergen actually was their headquarters because their
Interesting.
grandmaster was a guy called who is still alive, to my knowledge, called Arild Stromsvag, and he is still, I think, the current grandmaster of the OTO, but also he's a musician. So you see, there was also a link, very direct link with the music world. So a lot of these people at night will go around clubs, and so by me being able as a DJ to go in those environments without being noticed,
Yeah, you
I could
saw it.
acquire, yeah, I could
Yeah.
see, and I
Okay.
could also acquire a lot of information, and I could acquire through their trust. And then I entered their lodges, then I entered their rituals, and then I got a little bit scared because at one point I was faced with the choice. If I go further, then I will have to be involved in some really, really dark stuff.
My
And so
goodness.
I was like, that's not for me.
For
But
sure.
definitely helped me understanding how evil can hide in plain sight in countries where people seemingly seem very innocent and Pippi Longstrom style, and everything is kind of funny. But then, maybe the guy like Carl Abramson, he looks like a professor with all these blonde children, and him with the glass on. He maybe wears a very the actual people who you see in the dark scene, in the metal, black metal scene, they are like the soldiers of these evil people. These evil people are like professors, like lawyers, people, doctors, especially in the society, psychiatrists that had this double kind of identity, that then, you could find them at night dressed in latex in some kind of weird satanic S&M club.
A double life, yes. Quite
Yes.
common for sure. And of course, if anybody wants to look further into what we're talking about. There's actually a documentary. Well, not a documentary, but there's something on Netflix, by the way. I think it's called Lord of Chaos, if I remember. It's not a documentary. It's just a biopic, and it's well, some people liked it, some people didn't. I'm not sure
I
if you
think
saw
that
it,
Lord
Leo.
of Chaos was actually based on a book, and the guy who actually wrote the book is a guy who actually has been linked to the OTO, and in fact he works together with a guy I knew very well who was the secretary of the OTO in Oslo.
Very interesting. And of course, Leo, there was another comment made early on by someone I think by the name of DQ, and they said, "Ask Leo about his feud with Adam Green from No More News." What's going on with you and Adam Green?
It's not really a feud. I mean,
Who's this
the
guy?
guy is somebody, from what I heard, because after I had to get some proper info on him that you can't find on the net, because I really wanted to know what was his problem. Initially, I saw him like this guy was some kind of anti-Zionist, accusing me, Alex Jones, and of course, especially Alex Jones. He was targeting InfoWars all the time. And even Trump saying that we are all Jewish Zionists.
Oh, is it because of his wife? Is that why he was angry?
No, apparently, from what instead people from then people in Jerusalem told me. So people, because he actually has been in Israel and he's actually partly Jewish. So it is a problem that has to do with his not accepting his Jewish side. And it's a more profound problem that has to do with the psyche. In fact, a few weeks ago, when I brought up this thing with the Pew, a day or two later, one of the people from the Pew who didn't tell me anything, is Lowell, is a Jewish representative there in Jerusalem, who used to be a student of Barry Kamish. You remember Barry Kamish?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a very intelligent guy. He went there into the Twitter, I think, of Adam Green, and started to ask him, why did you attack Zagami, making that video, I think on the 5th of January? What's your problem with him? As I said, he doesn't seem to be a bad guy. I think he simply has a problem of identity, because he is basically rejecting his Jewish side. I mean, it's something that he has to sort out. And I think that lately he has actually brought somebody from a rabbi, somebody on his show. And so it seems like he wants to maybe change direction. You see, I have been very critical about Zionism, especially labor Zionism. But we have to be very, very careful to not confuse labor Zionism with Zionism in general,
Right.
which was born out of a reaction to those heresies which we discussed earlier in the show, the Sabbatean Frankist heresy.
Mm-hmm.
So it's and also the necessity of the Jewish people of having, of course, their own land, but at the same time, it's very instrumental, as you know, this land, for a series of controversies that have been have never ended, and that are not only the Jewish people facing the Palestinians, but is the interference of foreign people like England, that was a big player, Great Britain, because that Palestine was part of their own protectorate. But before that, there was Turkey, and it's a lot of clashes going on, especially when it comes to the Shiites, the Sunni. So then you have, of course, these never-ending fights that are internal to Islam, that are used then by the external forces like the Jesuits to manipulate them. And so then you have groups like Hamas or Hezbollah, which are, of course, respectively of two different sides of Islam, that all end up playing into the enemy and what the enemy is doing. Licio Gelli, I don't know if you know who he is. He used to be the worship master of the P2 Lodge. Licio Gelli is a very famous guy, even if now he's dead. He died 4 years ago. And what happened is that he wrote a book on the history of the Knights Templars, and he himself knew a lot about it. And he said the Templars were clever enough to always play the opposite sides of Islam against them during their time in Jerusalem, while they kept on in control of the situation. So it's something that's been going on for hundreds of years, I guess, these conflicts. But now it's different, because now, of course, now the Israelites have returned to their land. In a way, they have fulfilled the prophecy. And now we have to work together. And of course, there is a negative side to that prophecy. We all know about, of course, the interest that the Antichrist will have. But we also know that Christ will have the same interest. The Messiah will be the same for the Jews and the Christians. And of course, even the Muslims. So it is a very delicate time that we are living in, that needs to be monitored and discussed, I think, with a certain degree of responsibility. Without Adam Green has been very simplistic, and people like this, with their own way of doing things, unfortunately, end up hurting their own people. In fact, Adam Green, with his own anti-Zionist vision of things, that of course I can understand some of it, but some of it completely wrong. And in the end, who is he harming? He's harming his own people, because he's actually partly Jewish.
My goodness. So let me get this straight. He is actually a Jew and he hates himself, basically. Is that what you're telling me here?
Yes, it's like Adolf Hitler. You know that Adolf Hitler was partly Jew.
For sure. My God.
That's unfortunate. I think that now Adam Green has understood that.
Do you think? Go ahead.
No, because after the criticism which I moved against him on the pew, and actually I did it on purpose, because I wanted to do it in front of Roseanne and of a guy from Jerusalem, and of course monitored by all the rabbis and everything. I wanted to make it clear, this guy needs to be helped. And they actually apparently tried to contact him, and they're trying to help him. So in the end, I hope that he will endorse a different vision of things.
You're only trying to help. I understand that. Do you think Adam Green is a beta male?
I don't think so. I don't really stand by this identification, these classifications, though.
Well, look who's afraid of Adam Green.
He's a guy. He's very magnetic. He has definitely attracted the interest of a lot of people. So that could put him in a different category for some people. Maybe they will think he's more of an alpha male, but I think that he has a problem with his own ethnicity, from what I know, because of problems that he had in his own family with people of the Jewish side of his family, yes. That he had really some personal problems.
So that's where the root comes from. Okay. Yes. I see. My God. Well, that's life. Sometimes it's just a roll of the dice. You don't know where it's going to end up. And, sometimes you got to go where it goes. Flow with water. Flow like water. My God.
I mean, I wish him well, and it wasn't for me, like I didn't criticize him because I wanted anything bad for him. He instead criticized me in a very vicious way, and so it's his own problem. In the end, I'm sure that he will come to regret it.
Understood. Well, that's unfortunate. I hope everything works out for him.
Absolutely, but we will keep him in our prayers. And as I said, there is people of Jewish faith that are trying to get him to realize certain mistakes, and that's to do with his ethnicity. If he wasn't Jewish, it would be a completely different ballgame.
I see. Understood. And one of the things that you talked about the very last time you were here, Leo, and it's something that my listeners were quite intrigued about, was your encounter with Benjamin Fulford. Both of you published books together at one time. Both of you were, I guess you could say, friends at one time. And of course, you revealed something pretty heavy the last time you were here, Leo.
I find him completely bizarre, man. I mean, the guy has lost his last sense of decency, and he's completely insane in his statements. I mean, he says things that, he sends me mails, and I'm like, Benjamin, why don't you go back to be a serious journalist? I mean, you have to understand how I met Benjamin. You know, I come from a journalistic background, okay? Aside from my background in the music business, my second job when I had spare time was always to be a journalist. I learned the trade by going into a newspaper called La Repubblica when I was very young. And I actually even younger, when I was only 15, 16, I actually started working with a socialist radio station after I worked in a Catholic radio station to start with. And I always aimed at being a journalist. So I went around in the 80s interviewing people, even rather famous people, and for my radio shows and stuff. And the internet didn't exist back then. So it was a very different kind of game. You had to be really a professional and you had to learn the trade. And I learned it from a very, very young age. I had my first radio show when I was 13 years of age.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I went on the radio the first time when I was 10 years old, reading fairy tales for kids.
Yeah, for those that don't know, Leo was a well-established DJ at one time. Very, very popular too.
Yeah, I was both a DJ, a radio presenter, and during my time as a radio presenter, I became also a journalist, because in Italy, to be a journalist, you have to belong to an order of the journalist, and you can only exceed if you are working with a recognized news organization. And so I started to work with a recognized news organization at a very early age. I remember still I had this card as a journalist. I was very proud of it. I was only 16 and I was trying to make myself up even when I went around for the interviews, you know, like to these big people groups and stuff, especially in the music business. But it teach me a lot. It teach me a lot to do that and to work. Then later on, when I started as a DJ and I became not started as a DJ. I brought basically my DJing skills in bigger clubs, because I always started with some parties, some clubs between the age of 13 and 16. At 16, I started working in clubs. And then I started working, thanks to my grandmother, immediately in clubs that were legendary. I was very lucky because my grandmother, Felicity Mason and Cumming, was a very influential person, friend with everyone in the music business, from the Rolling Stones to Sting to Pet Shop. And I was Peter Gabriel write me letters saying I could go and visit him in his studios. People will be very, very helpful. So I found myself, though I was very passionate about music from a very early age, when I was 16, 17, I started working clubs in London. And London was really the place to be in the 80s. And these clubs were not just any clubs, but were clubs in Bond Street, like Legends, where you had people like the Rolling Stones, Simple Minds, people, all kinds of famous people coming in at every hour of the day and night. And I was DJing there, and I became very popular. Style Council, Paul Weller from the Style Council used to come in and play some records with me sometime. And so I immediately known I mean, I wanted to bring a different side of music. I was very fixated from the mid 80s in electronic music, on the contrary of what was going on in the mainstream radios and so on. And so I was following very much electro and the early house scene. And
you need that kind of music, by the way, Leo, for your intro. For the intro of the Pew, some good electronic music from you would be nice.
I would like to do so. The problem with the Pew is that we, as I said, but like all our productions, we still don't have a main studio for mixing the whole thing. But we will in the next few months probably have a more professional setup. As I said before, we are doing it really focusing more on the content on the technical side of things, and this is good because I think that we are leaving more importance to what we want to discuss to have a more professional setup. I mean, you have to understand that I'm used to. You were talking about Lords of Chaos. That based on the book Lords of Chaos, that movie from 2018.
Right.
The music is composed by Sigur Rós. Sigur Rós used to come to my parties in Iceland.
Wow.
I mean, I used to DJ for them, and my DJ parties were a mix of esoteric content with people from the OTO and other people doing projections, occult symbols, all kinds of stuff. I mean, I was in the dark side.
Yeah, you
I
were
admit
deep.
it. I was very deep in the dark side, so I was pretty much. But at the same time, I was also kind of wanting to understand more. Always, never, giving everything for granted. And in the end, like I said, I opposed all this. But when I opposed it, then it was initially was a big clash. And I started having some very serious problems because these people, very powerful people.
I hear you. And Leo, as we wind down here, we are coming close to the end here, and I feel bad. There's so much to talk to you about. But of course, as we were discussing religion earlier, I meant to ask you, what are your thoughts in terms of most of America now starting to turn away from religion and the rise of witchcraft is here? There's all sorts of conventions going on now. There's the welcome.
I
Mhm.
think
Go
that
ahead.
from what I can gather from my own experience, yes, there is definitely a rise in paganism, and there is a rise in the darkest sides of paganism, even amongst Freemasonry. And that's very sad to see that some lodges have gone really totally the wrong way. They have forgotten that Freemasonry, for example, has Christian origins. And so I'm trying to bring those origins back into Freemasonry by trying to teach those people who want to listen. Unfortunately, though, as I said, darkness prevails in many institutions: the church, Freemasonry, politics, and that's the big problem of our age. And it's not only a problem in Freemasonry or in the specific religion like Catholic Church, because all churches have problems, and so a lot of people kind of don't want to go to church anymore because of all the scandals, or don't want to go towards Christianity because of all the scandals, and so they go towards the other direction. However, I must say, be honest, that I'm seeing since the advent of this new age of Trump a big change, because there is people who are here, and I crossed the United States, as you know. I went all over Route 60. I went all over the United States. I
Word.
went from Colorado to Idaho to Utah to Nevada to Texas to New Mexico, everywhere.
You hit the
And,
states,
and,
yeah.
and what I can perceive is that there is a lot of people who went back to tradition and want to go back to a proper Christian way of perceiving things and a Christian conservative way of perceiving. But what does this mean? I think that in the end, unfortunately, the enemy has realized the destruction of the family values, has realized all this because they have in their hands the media. They can inspire people negatively from Hollywood with the films. They can do it through music. I know it myself because, as I told you, I was involved with music myself, so I know how easy it's to
Right.
manipulate people using certain catchy phrases or certain symbols. But now we are in a moment of time where it's also becoming evident that this stands with a completely different way of life. And so I think that the big problem here that I described in volume 4 of my confessions is that if they continue forcing this conflict between these two sides of society, of course, at that point we go towards a civil war, and then this is not going to be anymore the United States of America, but a separated States of America. Some states are going to go one way, some states are going to go the other, because it's really becoming obvious that there is here two different sides of society that don't really get on with each other.
I agree. We're seeing it all the time. And of course, your book, Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 4, I believe,
Yeah.
American Renaissance 2.0, and the missing link from the invisible world. It is out now. Definitely pick it up. I actually have a copy. I think it's a fantastic book, like the rest of your books. Many consider all your books quite vital, Leo.
Thank you, thank you. It's a lot of work doing books. It's really a lot of work. I'm glad that finally now I have been able to find a new home here where I can have at least the possibility of working by sitting down and writing day and night. Because that's for me, it's like a job, of course, but it's not like working in a factory. You have to understand that you are filtering something that is very important. Is a collective, is a message to the collectivity, is information that needs to bring people to awareness through also credible sources, credible links, footnotes that are in my books, also, as you know, very meticulous.
Right.
And I try to do this for the sake of knowledge. So I'm glad that the Pew has, that is my show on Sunday that we've been talking about.
Sunday, right.
Yes, every Sunday, and tomorrow, of course, 9:30 a.m. PST, we have another episode. And aside from Roseanne Barr, which of course we all know, we have people of great culture that contribute with their knowledge, and they are people from different walks of life with very different visions of life. We have Rudolf Steiner style personality like John Barnwell, who has been the manager of the Mayflower bookshop, which is one of the main esoteric bookshop in the Western world. I mean, the Mayflower bookshops is an incredible place, and he was the manager of this place. And so I mean, it's somebody who knows about certain books, about certain things. I think that we are disclosing a lot with my books and with my shows.
For sure.
And I hope that I will be able to disclose more. The thing is that the Vatican, in the last few months since I left Italy, has actually been even more aggressive against me. I mean, I will not be able to go now back to Italy.
You miss it.
No, I will not be able to go back.
Oh, you won't go back? Okay.
No, I'm just saying, because they might arrest me as soon as I arrive.
Oh, my.
I mean, they are actively persecuting not only me now, but they're now persecuting also my supporters and followers.
Oh, that's not good to hear, Leo.
The Vatican has issued through their friends at the Rotary Club and stuff, they have been attacking me left, right, and center, inspiring maybe people to move lawsuits and other things, but also trying to get me to silence.
Of course.
So I mean, I'm glad that I'm not there anymore. I'm really glad. So I guess that, how do you see me after my move? I mean, we know each other for a while now, no? And I think that now that I moved here to the US, at least I feel like comfortable.
You seem happier, Leo. I've talked to you on and off before, and I've seen some of the things you talk about, of course, and I feel like you're doing quite well, better than a lot of other people that move here and don't do anything.
Now, well, of course, I want to. I moved here to bring something added to American society. When I asked, now I've gone to my process, and also I asked the help of the Republican Lawyers Association and so on for this process that I hope will be successful, is because I want to contribute. And I don't want to be a weight in any way to American society.
That's pretty noble.
So I'm trying to do this process also in the most legal way possible, and that is the only way that everybody should do this process. Unfortunately, I must say that compared to how it was for a lot of my friends that came here 20, 30 years ago, now it takes a lot more time, and the results are not as certain as they was 20 years ago. So I'm really waiting months and months on end, and I still don't know for 100% that I have to always have a backup plan. So I have a backup plan, but ultimately I hope that with the re-election of President Trump, I will become an American citizen.
Well, I hope the best for you, Leo. And of course, I only have 2 more questions left before I let you go, Leo, and I hope you can answer them. They, of course, are fun questions for you, and I definitely needed to get these in there before I let you go. And of course, many years ago, Leo, we heard Father Malachi Martin talk about this personally. He personally observed a satanic ritual being carried out by one of the high-ranking priests there, and at the time, many wrote him off. They didn't believe what he was saying, And of
Yeah.
course, now we know that he probably wasn't lying, was he?
No, it wasn't. And in fact, this was also something that happened as soon as I came out in the public arena with my work in 2006. In the middle of 2006, I started this middle, I would say September 2006, so not right at the middle. But at the middle of 2006, there was a particular episode that created this friction against the Monte Carlo Lodge that kind of gave me the start to search a way to survive these people and to also expose what they were doing, because I wasn't happy with what they were doing. And I knew that what Father Malachi Martin had said was true, because I had viewed it myself. There were people doing those things, and that there were all this corruption and all that going on in the Vatican, and that there was actually Satanism going on in the Vatican. And so I wanted to make it public. So I was exposing it with a small blog, but then of course it was picked up by David Icke. And then I also started a show with Greg Zismansky on the Genesis Broadcasting Network. That was very successful. At that time, we were not as many as we are now doing what we are doing, because also technically you needed to be a little bit more professional. No, you had to, you couldn't just bring around your own podcast from one moment to the other.
Yes.
So it was different back then. So you actually had to rely on radios and stuff. So when I came out with this information, I was immediately attacked. I mean, I ended up with an espionage accusation. I ended up with a government like the Norwegian government putting me inside a car with the 3 Secret Service members threatening me to close down my website. I mean, they came even into my house with police, social workers threatening to take my child. That after they eventually managed to convince my wife, but all this happened at the time, and it was shocking, no?
Of course.
I went through all this. Fortunately, now with my new wife and with the
how is your new wife? Yeah, how's the wife doing? Is she okay out there?
She's American, so she's definitely.
But she likes Palm Springs.
She definitely likes Palm Springs. She's never been here in Southern California like me, so it was totally new for both of us.
Nice.
But we had been here in 2014 for a few months. We have been living in Long Beach.
Oh, Long Beach.
We have been working that's how actually I found eventually a book deal, because it took me a few months to find a book deal here in the States. I went back to Italy, and I started immediately working on the translation of the books, which took 3 years to translate all the books I had already written. And then I started to write new ones, of course. But as you know, I published now a number of books in the English language. I think they are now 7, 8, I don't know, but quite a lot. So I have published with both my wife's publishing company, which is Cursum Perficio, which we run basically together, and then the other company, which is Brad Olsen's CCCC Publishing, based in San Francisco, which published the trilogy, and then the Pope Francis Last Pope ? And the Invisible Master. So yes, I published 8 books up until now in the English language, and I'm glad that I have translated all the work, because the most difficult part of it was actually the translation, more than writing these new ones, which I actually started to write directly in English to make it more easy. While instead the translation, to make it really effective and to make it feel like it wasn't a translation, it took us a long time. And unfortunately, it's not like we get rewarded what people imagine with I don't know how much money. It's kind of modest what you get through books.
Oh yes.
But it is important because it finally led the people to understand that Leo Zagami was actually not only correct about certain things that he was saying back 15, 20 years ago, but the fact is that Leo Zagami is also somebody who has a lot more knowledge than only the videos, the articles you can read on the internet, which is maybe a page or two.
Very true.
A book is a much more in-depth experience, and so it is also a more challenging experience, and it has given me that credibility, which I think is important now, because now people know that it's not just. You see, I got attacked a lot when I came out with my take of the story of the New World Order, my involvement with the Illuminati network and all the secret society, Freemasonry. I got really attacked a lot.
I bet.
I mean, in 2006, the situation in the internet was few forums, social networks were just being born.
Just starting, right.
Starting, there was MySpace, Facebook was just appearing in the universities and so on. And these people from these secret societies, they had a million trolls against me on the internet, writing all kinds of rubbish. I mean, it was like suddenly I was writing, of course, my blog, this and that. I started the exposure work. Then they tried to close down the blog. The Secret Service, the actual Norwegian intelligence, called the PST, which is like the MI5, the Internal Security Service, came to me, threatened me. I refused. The website was closed down from Squarespace, which was hosting it, and was transferred in 24 hours to a web host in Italy to be more safe. And then we moved it around so to keep it up. But I didn't have the possibility of keeping things up because I will get hacked, and it took a long time to secure and understand how the internet works.
Yes.
And in the meantime, I will just put on the web every day, and suddenly I will see new stories on me that were completely I don't know, people were making things up on me.
The joys of the internet, no doubt.
Yeah, and it hurt me, especially at the beginning, because I was very genuine and wanting to.
You're trying to help.
Come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to help. I was coming out of this setup of crooks, but also I was used to be involved with these people. So I was, usually treated very well, in places, villas, nice car, whatever, Monte Carlo, Monaco, London, whatever, and going to Moscow, going there, going all over around the world and being treated in a certain way. And then you go on the internet and you are trying to help people, and they're insulting you and saying that you were a fake, this and that and all the other. I, of course, avoided the confrontation where possible, and I simply stuck to the message, and also brought out, of course, the evidence with documents, photos, and so on, because I had created this evidence as a backup plan. I knew that it could be important to expose these people if they didn't stand to the packs, and that once I saw that they were actually threatening my life, I exposed them. And so the first thing I remember they did, I had a computer back then, a Mac G4.
Oh, yes.
You know those PowerBook Mac G4?
I recall.
And what happened, it was incredible. I had started this exposure work, and this guy who I had exposed from the International Rotary Club, called Giorgio Ugo Balestrieri from the P2 Lodge, he was an expert in, he worked for the NSA also, and works for close to Israeli intelligence and this and that. He sent me a virus, and literally the hard disk in front of my eyes, the computer literally exploded.
Wow. That bastard.
It was like a virus. It was like you heard it. Shtuk, poof. And I was like, whoa, now I lost everything. Fortunately, I also had my own experts, and I had a guy who was like really a super expert. At that time, people who, were fixated with Mac were not as many. And this guy here was a real expert, and he managed to do what it would have cost me thousands of dollars, to recover data recovery from hard disk when they're damaged cost a lot of money.
Oh, yes.
Fortunately, this guy was in my lodge in Oslo, and we managed to recover all the material, and then that material was used for establishing my first website. So, there is things that happen even prior to me exposing all these people. There is, people don't know that, but for example, between 2003 and 2006, before I came out publicly, I was already fighting an internal war And so it kind of, and this internal work brought me to different countries. It was like with the support of very important people, but then so it went from Egypt to Russia to England to Norway to. So I mean, it was a pretty. It was this internal war of the Illuminati network that then I exposed in my books later on. So it kind of like my books were a response to all this. And I understood that books were important the moment in which I started to have hacks. And after 2 years of starting my exposure work in 2008, I understood that the internet was not a safe place for my knowledge.
Definitely. You have to grow a very thick skin, especially if you're going to be on the internet. And I'm sure you have all these years. And Leo, before I let you go, we are running out of time here, but before I let you go, what are your thoughts on the latest virus out there causing havoc, the coronavirus that's turning China upside down as we speak right now?
Yes, that is one of the things which actually I wrote in my books. I wrote in my book that in 2020 they will unleash a virus. I wrote it in volume 2 of my confessions.
That's true, you
it was
did.
written, and published in Italy in 2012 and in Japan, and then also published in the English language 3 or 4 years ago. So I mean, these are things that I have, of course, I've talked about them, and I warned people for years that this will happen. Nobody listened. We are now in this situation. The future of this COVID-19, unfortunately, is just the start. It might not be even the virus that hits all these millions of people and that brings 75% of the population to be eliminated, because that's what they want to do. There is already another virus apparently that is already ready, that is going to be even worse than the coronavirus, and the new virus that that is going to come out, it's like entry, is going to basically bring us to an instant heart attack and damage the heart very heavily within the first 24 hours and irreparably.
My goodness.
So this is the next strain of coronavirus that they are already implementing for the next level of attack on this society, this is an attack, of course, and it's an attack on our lives, and we have permitted, unfortunately, all this. And I hope that with these difficulties will come also maybe some more faith in people, and they will be able to understand really what is going on behind the scenes, because this is not the result of some freak encounter in nature with some animal, some obscure animal in a jungle or something.
Yeah, I don't believe that to be the case. I think it might have been created in a lab.
Yes, and I actually wrote
government.
an article. I was the first one in the world to broker this information. I don't know if you checked it out. On the leozagami.com site, we broke the information out that there was a book written in 1981 that actually had it was written in 1981, and originally it had this virus called Gorky 400 because it was based in the Soviet Union. The enemy was the Soviet Union. Once the Soviet Union finished, the same author, Dane Kons, which is very famous, he actually substituted in 1986 this. Hello?
I'm here.
Yes, he substituted with Wuhan 400, and also he trimmed the whole. Like authors, when we revise an old book, we tend to embellish it, trim it down, make it a little bit better than the original. And in 1996, he envisioned that this Wuhan 400 was coming out of one laboratory outside of Wuhan. That was one of the free labs that the Chinese had, that was working on biological weapons. So, I mean, it was pretty accurate. And
I agree.
People then now in the last few days after, I came out with this article, it went immediately viral. We received something like 20,000 visits in less than 24 hours on my site, nearly crashing it. And then I saw that now the Taiwan news brought out the same information. And people have been talking about it around the world. So I'm very happy that that I broke this scoop, but it is definitely important was important to break this scoop because I wanted people to understand that Dan Kuntz, who is of course a famous writer, one of the 6 most paid authors in the world, like most people who do that job, they take inspiration from reality, and they have connections with people maybe in certain parts of society, like military intelligence or whatnot. So the fact that he knew about bacteriological weapons and what kind of game they were playing behind the scenes, and he even knew about a laboratory in Wuhan and named it Wuhan 400, well, it's no coincidence, of course. It's something that we all know, we all knew it will eventually happen and manifest, but it was targeted for 2020. Because
Yes.
2020 is this turning point in which either with a war or either with a virus, you have to eliminate 3/4 of the population of the Earth, because that's what the Illuminati and the controllers of the New World Order, the deep state and all the rest have decided for us.
Governments always want to kill someone, Leo, and I want to thank you very much for being a part of the program. Leo, once again, thank you so much for being here. We will definitely do this again in the very near future, Leo.
Thank you so much, and all the best, and God bless all your listeners, and God bless the United States of America. That is now my new home. Thank you.
Wait a minute, Leo. Before you go ahead and plug the Pew one more time.
I would like to, of course, plug the Pew because it's this new show that we broadcast from the Leo Lion Zagami channel that you can find on YouTube. We will be able to broadcast also on other channels in the coming weeks. We are expanding our reach. It's featuring Roseanne Barr, the one and only Roseanne Barr that, of course, we all know about. And then we have a panel of eccentrics from all over the world, from London, Jerusalem, Detroit, and people that are very clever authors, eccentrics, but also people that want to put through unconventional ideas that challenge and want to positively inspire people on a Sunday. We have created this panel because we want to view these end times from a special platform. But I wanted to also say to our viewers, listeners, that it is not like, and I said this also during the show a couple of shows ago, we don't want to set we don't want to be viewed as we are on top of a pedestal preaching to, it's like a panel, friends interacting and trying to help people understand certain topics. If these topics are too difficult to understand, I beg people to write to us and ask us, and we will try in the best of our capacities to give you an answer, because we touch on very, very particular subjects, and at times, it kind of intellectually maybe is very challenging for the average listener or viewer. But we're doing it because we think that rather than give you a show with the content that a million other shows, we want to challenge the people by viewing also a different aspect of Roseanne, a different aspect of Leo Zagami, and all this with the help of some great people who are also excellent authors themselves, and people who have knowledge that is extraordinary. So let's put it together, and together also with the listeners and the viewers that intervene with their phone calls every now and then. We always try to have a challenging show on the topics that it's like we discuss what is, the topics of the week. Sometimes we discuss things that happened hundreds of years ago, but most of all, we try to stand with the topics of the week. That is our idea.
Very nice. Once again, thank you so much, Leo, for being a part of the program, and I'll talk to you again very soon with those drops, my friend.
And thank you to have me on. And of course, I've told you to buy my books because they help out very much in my mission and in my hopefully obtaining my US citizenship. So please go to leozagami.com. There is the links to my books or to my donation, of course, PayPal.
Very nice. All right. Thank you, Leo. Take care.
Thanks.
Good night. And there he goes, boys and girls. That was the one and only Leo Zagami. Definitely check out his work. go to his website or go to Amazon and pick up one of his books. Now, my goodness, now we're late. My God, we have to go on a break, ladies and gentlemen. I apologize. And thank you for sticking around. We do have another guest coming up. Angel Millar is live and direct, boys and girls. Don't miss that. We'll be right back after this little break. Stay tuned.
Have you thought of breaking through? Ain't it part of what you do? Catch a victim while he's dumb, break his larynx with your time, and it's time to get high. Well, this ain't no goddamn dream, it's exactly what it seems. Wake up today just to lay back down and say, I won't be coming back. Let's call it a heart attack. Give me some of that knack. This is just a final payback. They all flipped on me, took my passions, left me be. When I had a place to sit, a goddamn attitude to fit. Talk real smooth, knew where to spit. But things have changed and I have quit. Got nothing to look forward to but a backlash full of lies. You're too late for where you're going. This is fate, the whistle's blowing. It's much too late. It's all too late. You're much too late. Like a piss hole punk with his nose turned up and a fragrance all your own. Tell me what.
And welcome back to the program. Did you miss me? I missed you. Trust me, I thought about you while I was holding myself and urinating. I kept thinking about the chat room, and I kept thinking all those beautiful people in there. And I had to put it away. It was getting a little stiff there. So I'm glad you have returned. Thank you so much for being here, boys and girls. My God, I love the break. And now we are joined by our second guest, Mr. Angel Millar. Let's bring him in.
Yeah, no. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Angel, what's going on back there?
Oh, I'm talking to my cat.
Oh, you were talking to a cat.
Yeah.
I thought you might have been doing something back there. Something inappropriate. I was like, holy shit, Angel. We just started.
No.
My God. So, Angel, what's going on? How are you, my friend? Thank you so much for being a part of the program.
Oh, I'm good, Michael. Thanks very much for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. Angel, tell us about yourself. My God, I have your book here and I'm blown away by
Great.
it. And
Awesome.
yeah, man, I've been reading it and there's so much to say. I have so many questions to ask you. And,
Okay.
But before we do, I want you to take us back to your roots. You, of course, are from the UK.
Yeah, that's right. I've been living in North America for about 2 decades, but I'm actually from Southeast London originally, which is about 30 minutes by train into the center of London. But yeah, so I grew up really in a pretty small suburb, and yeah, later on I went to art college. I went to Chelsea College of Art and Design, and then Central St. Martin's, and both of which are pretty well known, pretty famous. And then in relation to the book, I started practicing kung fu in England a little bit after that.
Oh, wow.
And when I was really early on, I was very interested in spirituality and the esoteric and the occult and so on.
And did your father put you in karate?
No, kung fu, but no,
Or
he
kung
didn't.
fu,
I
rather,
actually,
sorry.
yeah, I actually started studying kung fu when I was around, I think around 25, somewhere around there.
Oh, okay. So later on in life.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So did you grow up playing soccer?
I did, although I didn't really like it because it's one of those things that's a little bit of an ego fest. So I kind of preferred rugby and athletics.
I like that. I've never really liked team sports too much, to be honest with you. I've always
Yeah.
liked combat sports more, one-on-one.
Right.
That's what I like. I, of course, grew up doing taekwondo and later, of course, jiu-jitsu, judo, and boxing.
Nice.
So yeah, I can relate with the things you talk about in your book, the
Cool.
3 stages of initiatic spirituality, craftsman and warrior, and magician.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
I think I got some of those down except for the craftsman.
So that's good. If you got 2 out of 3, that's pretty good.
Not there quite. Well, yeah, I'm still working on the craftsman. I'm not that good yet with my hands.
Yeah.
To choke people, I am, though. I mean, I got that down quite well, but not building stuff. Not that great.
Cool.
I'm getting there, though. But yeah, so, Angel, how on earth did you come across this subject? I'm sure your mom and dad definitely did not sort of push you this way. I'm sure you grew up
Yeah.
in a very religious household out there in the UK, right?
Well, actually, when I was growing up, and I think probably even now, Britain was really pretty secular. And if you ask my parents what religion we were, they would always say Church of England, but that really meant that we didn't go to church and we didn't own a Bible or anything like that. So yeah, so religion, spirituality, the esoteric and the occult were pretty much off the radar in terms of my family. Although I have an aunt who's kind of interested in these things as well, strangely enough.
Really?
But yeah, a little bit. Yeah, yeah. She has a friend who writes books on tarot, and
There we
which is
go.
kind of weird. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then when I was probably around 12 years old, I started having an interest in UFOs a little bit, and it was kind of a passing interest maybe, but it did get me into the swing of researching, and then when I was around 15, I honestly have no idea why I bought the book, but I bought a book on astral projection and the
Wow.
elements,
Okay.
and I tried out some of the astral projection techniques, and it was kind of interesting, but I really had no idea of what it was really about, or what the elements were or anything like this. But then a couple of years later, I came across basically an occult bookstore, you might say a new age bookstore, a few miles from my parents' home, and it was kind of a scene there. It wasn't really just a bookshop. It was like strange, curious, colorful characters coming and going, and different people into different forms of occultism. And there was kind of like a neo-pagan spiritual group practicing there and that kind of thing. So that was the little baptism by fire that I had. So
Understood. And I'm sure
yeah.
you have heard of Mr. David Icke since you were out there
Yeah,
for a
yeah, I
while,
have.
I'm
That's
sure.
right.
I actually had his son on the program many, many years ago.
Oh, really
Yeah,
interesting.
I need to bring him back on. What's your
Yeah.
take on Mr. David Icke?
You know, I don't have a comprehensive view of him, but from what I've heard him say, I think maybe he's actually become more sensible over the years. Maybe I'm misreading it, but I mean, he says some things that I think are a little bit out there, but then he says some things that seem to be pretty accurate in regard to government surveillance and this kind of thing, and the general culture of society. I think some of the things he says are pretty spot on.
Now, your book, how long did it take you to compile the information? It's quite well written, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question because I've written some books before, which were histories of Freemasonry, and as I say, my interest in these subjects, especially the occult, the esoteric, goes back at least a couple of decades, and other aspects that are in the book. I concentrate on the craftsman, warrior, and magician, and so the warrior, I look at a lot of martial arts in there. So, and I've been practicing martial arts for a couple of decades as well, on and off. So it's difficult to say when exactly I started researching for this book. I mean, literally speaking, it was probably a few years ago. It probably took a couple of years to write, but at the same time, it was kind of filtered through my lifelong experiences as well. So I guess really it's probably taken more like 20 plus years
Okay,
to write.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's taken you a long time, and of course, Angel, you mentioned UFOs earlier. Have you had any sort of strange encounters with what would be considered the quote unquote paranormal or any strange lights in the sky at any time in your life, Angel?
I haven't had any strange lights in the sky really, but I've definitely experienced sort of weird experiences with meditation and different kind of things like that, but not lights in the sky per se.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely.
But you
I'm
have
waiting for that.
you're waiting for that one, but you have experienced something that, sort of paranormal, right?
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. Yeah.
What happened? Tell us.
Yeah, a few different things. I mean, I would say that not exactly paranormal, but verging on paranormal, and probably one of the least strange but memorable experiences. I was meditating in a small woods one day when I was pretty young, and I was going through the chakras, meditating on the chakras, and I only did it for a couple of minutes. It really wasn't a big thing at all. And usually I meditate for a lot longer, but I did it just for a couple of minutes, and then when I thought I finished the meditation, and I moved my hand, and I noticed this sort of like stream of hands coming off when I moved. So it was like I don't guess it's like rapid eye movement or something. So I was seeing these like millions of hands and millions
Wow.
of arms, and I sort of became lost in these moving arms and hands. I guess it's almost like an LSD trip or something like that. Which was pretty crazy, really.
It sounds
Especially
crazy.
as it really wasn't a big deal or anything that I was doing.
Yeah, that's pretty trippy. And of course, you were
Yeah,
very
yeah,
young. And Angel, how
yeah.
old were you when you moved to New York?
I was around 28, I think, 28, 29.
Wow. Okay. So you've been here a while.
Yeah, that's right. I have. Yeah, yeah.
And what was it like for you coming out here at 28?
It was strange but kind of fascinating. I have to say that life sometimes proves you wrong and pushes you into unexpected directions. And I never thought that I would ever come to New York. Partly in England at that time, there was a sort of big impression of New York being this sort of violent gangland where it was just sort of cultureless and dangerous. But
Why
when
New?
I actually came here, it
Yeah.
wasn't like that at all.
What?
So
Why New York though? Out of all places.
yeah, well, I think it's partly to do with American TV and
Ah.
American sort of New
Okay.
York cop shows. But
Okay.
we were actually, when I was at high school, we were given the book Run Baby Run to read. I don't know if you've heard of that book.
I am. Unfortunately, I have.
I
Yes,
think
I've
you're the
read it.
first American I've come across that has actually.
My goodness.
Yeah,
Interesting. Interesting.
yeah. But as you know, so Run Baby Run is basically the real life story of a gang leader in New York, and it's
Yeah.
basically a catalog of violence. The more you get into it, so it definitely left an impression.
Very nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've taken in all the cultural movies and such out there.
Some of them, not all of them actually.
Have you seen Taxi yet?
Oh no, I haven't actually.
Oh my. Yes, that's a film you should definitely watch. A Taxi Driver.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh yes, 1976 classic with.
Oh okay, yeah.
Oh yes, I'm sure you probably have come across some photographs on the internet. I'm sure it's
Yeah,
Robert De
definitely.
Niro's
Yeah,
greatest work.
yeah.
Definitely watch a Taxi Driver when you can.
Okay, we'll do.
Yeah, I think you'll like it. So, my God, what got you involved with the Freemasons of all things?
Yeah, so as I was mentioning, when I was around 17, I was really I really got very seriously into the esoteric, and I was practicing neo-paganism and the occult and various other things. And in Great Britain at that time, pretty much when you're growing up, you hear of the Freemasons, and it's usually presented as, oh, the Freemasons, they're a club for corrupt politicians and businessmen, and they have a funny handshake, and it all sounded very boring. And then a friend of mine, when I was around 18, said, oh no, they practice ritual magic. And I thought, this can't be true. But it sounds pretty fascinating if that's what they're being, accused of. And a little while later, purely by coincidence, I was looking through a used bookstore in Greenwich Market, which is also in Southeast London, and I actually came across a couple of the rituals there, and I purchased the Rose Croix ritual of Freemasonry, and later on, I don't quite remember how, but I got hold of the Royal Arch degree of Freemasonry as well, and I read them, and it didn't really make a lot of sense to me, but I could see that there was something intelligent there, and I wasn't really coming across other things like that. And then when I moved to New York, pretty much, I wasn't able to take a lot of books with me or a lot of things with me, but it struck me that I basically brought books on the martial arts and on Freemasonry, and I saw the Grand Lodge building in New York has a big Masonic flag outside.
It's pretty wild. I saw photographs of it recently on an article,
Yeah,
online, and I thought, holy shit, I want to go in there.
Yeah. It's a fascinating building, and you can
Yeah.
actually take tours of it as well.
Oh,
And
nice.
it's kind of a strange experience because all of the rooms are decorated in different ways. So one looks like you're inside an Egyptian tomb, and another one is like medieval European. And then you come outside into the streets of New York, and you're like, did I just go through that? That was really weird. So it's kind of an experience. But when I arrived, so I decided to go in and ask if I could become a member, and it took about a year, but eventually it happened. So.
Interesting. That is rather interesting. It's a very nice building, by the way. And of course,
Yeah.
how long have you been a Freemason?
Yeah, since 2001, so that's around 19 years at this point.
My God. So you
Yeah.
are definitely deeply in there.
Yeah, I guess that's right. And I keep meeting people now that haven't been a Freemason as long, and it feels a little weird because it wasn't like that before. So I guess, yeah.
Understood. Understood.
Yeah.
You know, what's weird is um, I'm just trying to figure out how to really structure or say this the proper way and structure this the correct way. But, I was supposed to be joined by another guest earlier here tonight,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they didn't want any involvement with any Freemasons on the program for some reason.
Oh,
Yeah,
oh,
I mean
really interesting.
they thought they saw Leo was going to be on, and they saw that you were going to be on, and they were like, "No, I'm not going to do the show. I'll
Okay.
come on when no one else is on that's affiliated with any sort of Freemasonry." And my question for you was, why was that guest like that?
Yeah, well, I can't say why he was like that, but there is different conspiracy theories out there, and some of them are a few hundred years old. But typically, the people that don't like Freemasonry or find Freemasonry sinister tend to be either fundamentalist uh, religious people, usually either Baptists, Catholics, or Muslims, or tend to be more of the sort of agnostic or atheist sort of New World Order crowd that associate Freemasonry with the Illuminati and the Illuminati with this one world government,
Right.
which isn't the case with Freemasonry, and it's pretty easy to check out with reputable sources. And as I say, you can go to the building and this kind of thing. So, but those tend to be the people that are most uh, questioning and a little bit paranoid about Freemasonry, I would say.
So they're probably a little bit confused about it. In other words.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, and it's not entirely the fault of let's say conspiracy theorists. It is also the fault of some Freemasons as well, who have made sort of ridiculous statements over the years, and even now, I'm slightly surprised that there's still this fascination in Freemasonry with the Knights Templar, and the Knights
Of
Templar
course.
is certainly an interesting historical phenomenon, but there's often this kind of belief that even with many Freemasons that there's some kind of conspiracy that the Knights Templar brought something from the Middle East or some sacred knowledge, and then somehow went into the builders, and it becomes very complex. And
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
a lot of the Bible belters out there, when they
Mm,
talk about the Knights Templar, they bring up the fact that they used to rock the Baphomet on their shields. So that's kind of why some of them are a little reluctant, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but that's one of the things that they always complain about. That they
Yeah, there's
worship
an
Satan and all
association with
sorts of stuff.
Baphomet. Yeah,
Right, right.
yeah,
But that wasn't
yeah.
the case.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in the Knights Templar, but yeah, I don't know how much of it is true or not, but certainly
I'm
it gets more and
skeptical.
more elaborated. Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical about that after all the
Yeah.
years I've read into it. I'm not an expert, obviously, but from what I read, I think that's sort of a little bit out there.
Yeah, a lot of things associated with the Knights Templar tend to be kind of out there, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna won't get any argument from me on that one. And of course, I saw one of your videos, by the way, and I needed to bring this up to you.
Oh, yeah.
What is sacred masculinity?
Yeah. So, well, I guess different people would have different definitions, but I'm really talking about masculinity not as a kind of posturing and the cliches of modern society, but really of being in touch not only with ourselves as individuals, but in touch with our, let's say, our own bodies and its function and its difference to the female body as well. And obviously there is a long tradition of what you might call sacred masculinity, of male initiatic societies. Knights or orders would be one such society. Martial arts groups often were originally male, and the Freemasonry is typically all male as well. Though there are these sort of breakaway Masonic organizations that will initiate women as well, but it's largely all male.
By the way, in the chat room, they're asking how much does Freemasonry cost, or is it not free?
Yeah, so it depends really on the lodge itself. I believe in England it's actually quite a lot more expensive, but in America it's probably the price of a mid-level gym membership. I think my dues are around $220 a year, which is more expensive than some lodges and cheaper than some others as well. But uh, I think the average annual membership is probably somewhere between $90 and $250. So when you work that out on a monthly basis, it's not incredibly inaccessible to most people.
Understood. And right now, I have a GIF in the chat room playing nonstop for the chat room, and
Oh wow!
it's Donald Trump, and he's next to Jeffrey Epstein. And
Yeah.
he looks like he's told them a pretty good goddamn joke, and Jeffrey Epstein is breaking up laughing, cracking up there. I'm wondering what he's telling Jeffrey Epstein in this gif here. But what are your thoughts and opinions on Prince Andrew and his sort of connection with Jeffrey Epstein?
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, over the last few years, I've really limited my interest in politics. I really dialed it back just because I found that uh, it just wasn't very helpful to me to be interested in it. I was getting sort of sidetracked. So I'm not an expert in anything political at all, and I might even be a little bit ignorant sometimes. But I think it's a very strange association for a member of the monarchy,
My
and
goodness,
it all
yes.
it all looks incredibly unsavory and very, very dubious at best.
My goodness. Well, I'm glad you answered that question as honestly as you can or could. Right. And Eyes Wide Shut in the chat room says, do you get a Masonic ring?
No, you don't. Well, I mean, you can buy a Masonic ring, but you're not given one, and you're not obliged to wear one either. So,
And obviously, you enjoy being a Freemason, correct? It's been a very positive experience for you.
yeah, well, actually, the fraternity has changed enormously over the last 3 years, and I would say if you had joined 10 years ago or more, you might have found it a little bit of a struggle because after World War II and in the 20th century in general, the people that joined often just wanted camaraderie. They were coming back from war and they wanted some kind of structure. some kind of camaraderie with the guys, and it could be a lot of sort of organizing barbecues and this kind of thing. But over the last 3 years, the esoteric and spirituality and self-development and interest in alchemy and Kabbalah and so on has really come back into focus, and I think that's partly because there have been these so-called Masonic cons, which are usually 1 or 2 day conventions where there's lots of speakers talking about all kinds of Masonic related activity, but that's around the US, and that's really helped to bring spirituality and the esoteric back into focus. And the guys that are joining now, they tend to also be interested in spirituality and symbolism and mysteries and mythology and so on. So it's actually been a really positive change over the last few years.
Understood. And in terms and in terms of religion, Angel, how do you identify yourself?
I don't really identify myself with a religion anymore. As I mentioned, growing up, my parents were very secular, and I've explored different religions. When I was around 20, 21, I started visiting a Benedictine monastery every year and staying there for like a week or a few days or 10 days. And for those who don't know, Benedictines are a type of Catholic monasticism, and they're associated mostly with work, so that they would do things like gardening or teaching and this kind of thing. But obviously, it's a real monastery, so they're getting up in the very early morning to pray and do their rituals and so on. So I explored that for a few years, and I found that to be a pretty amazing experience.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, it was very different, and it's easy to be critical of Christianity, and with all the things that we hear, and there's a very much a sort of anti-Christian feeling in the West, I think, often, sometimes with good reasons and sometimes for bad reasons. But I think when you experience something like that, you have a totally different take on the religion, and they were not fanatical or fundamentalist at all. They were just sort of interested in outsiders and interested in me, and I was able to go along to all the rituals. It was quite a beautiful experience. But
Interesting.
I would say, yeah. And then a few years ago, I started to become pretty interested in Hinduism, largely because well, one of the reasons was I'd been doing chakra meditation since I was really young, and that's a part of Hindu Tantra. And I was reading the Bhagavad Gita a lot. So a few years ago, I was sort of identifying as a Hindu.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that's very interesting about you, Angel, is the fact that you're very open-minded with this. And most of the time, most Freemasons are heavily Christians, really.
Yeah, that's traditionally been the case. I mean, it's partly to do with the fact that the West has been largely Christian as well. But yeah, in America, I do remember hearing a lecture by one author whose name escapes me years ago, and he was pointing out that most of the early churches were funded by members of Masonic lodges. They were active in both. So there's definitely this long tradition of Freemasonry and Christianity, although there's a lot of criticism and from Christian churches. Strangely enough, there's actually a big tradition of Freemasons being Christians as well. So yeah, it's definitely been the case that sometimes other religions have not always been welcome. But again, I think that's something that's changing as well. And in my lodge, we've started putting, I think, the Torah and the Quran on the altar along with the Bible as well. And if somebody were a Hindu, then they could take their obligation on the Bhagavad Gita, or if it were another religion, that would certainly not be a problem in the lodge that I belong to.
Yeah, I'm glad that there's no sort of conflict with what you believe in. I'm sure there's other Masonic lodges out there that might sort of have a little bit of conflict or even heat with you for being so open-minded.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think, if I went more into the Midwest in a, smaller location, then that could be maybe an issue. But, luckily I'm in New York, and my lodge is very much more focused on the spiritual and the esoteric. So they're pretty open-minded to this as well.
Nice. And
Yeah.
I gotta ask you, Angel, what's your opinion on the fact that there seems to be a rise in Wicca paganism and just the fact that witchcraft is on the rise and most religion right now, most younger people are sort of turning their back to it. What's your take on that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's probably both a good thing and a bad thing at the same
Yeah,
time.
probably both good and bad.
Yeah, and I think the bad aspect of it is that now that there are all these different religions and there's Christianity is on the decline, we don't really have any religious festivals that brings everyone together in the community, and even things like Easter and Thanksgiving and even Christmas to a large degree can be just sort of social occasions, or maybe just waiting for the sales the next day. And you don't really want a society to be focused on Black Friday sales and this kind of thing, or Boxing Day sales.
Yes.
So that's pretty bad. But obviously there is a reaction partly against religious literalism and religious fundamentalism, but maybe also against secularism and this kind of culture of living for the weekend or living for the sales. Or living for material things. There seems to be a reaction against that as well, and certainly it's not really enough. Material things can't really sustain us, and we do need some kind of community, and we do need some kind of spiritual practice, and some kind of philosophy that's sort of transcendent and takes us out of ourselves as well. So
My goodness. Now, Angel, let's talk about your book, The 3 Stages of Initiatic Spirituality. And one section of your book, you mention semen being a symbolism for, yes, take us through
yeah.
that.
Yeah, so that's with the Dragon Slayer section, I think, right? And yes, partly it's sort of curious because semen has this symbolism both in the East and West.
That's true.
So yeah, so in the East with Hinduism, for example, and I believe also with Taoism to a large extent, there's a kind of prohibition on men releasing semen, and the idea is that the semen is supposed to be mentally or through the use of the mind and through meditation, that the semen is not released from the body but is absorbed into the body and drawn up to the brain where it sort of nourishes the body. I don't think that can be done literally, but I believe what's really being said is it's the idea that the semen has a kind of energy. It's a kind of it's also not just a fluid, but it's also an energy, and you can extract the energy from it and disperse that through your body for longevity. I believe that's really what's being talked about there. And you find these sort of weird, interesting myths in the West as well, with the gods ejaculating into the skin of an ox and it's buried, and then it gives birth to a god later on, to Orion. So it's you find these strange parallels.
Yeah, you really do. And of course, you mentioned Aleister Crowley in your book,
Mhm.
and I wanted you to further expand on some of the things that you mentioned about him. What's your take on Aleister Crowley?
Yeah, well, he's a very controversial character, even within the world of the occult, actually. And a lot of sort of neo-pagans don't like him and don't want to be associated with him because he has this reputation for being, a Satanist or something like that. But my take on Crowley is probably quite different. And I'm not a devotee of Crowley or a follower of Crowley. I wouldn't really want to follow Crowley.
Understood.
But yeah,
Mhm.
but I think you can still admire at least aspects of somebody that you don't necessarily agree with, and And what I find fascinating about Crowley is that he was so wide-ranging in his interests. He studied or practiced boxing when he was at university. Then he became a mountaineer, and he was a pretty successful mountaineer with one or two disasters, but he was pretty successful as a mountaineer. And then he wrote obviously books on the occult, but he also wrote fiction and poetry. And for a while, he was also pretty successful as a fine art painter in Germany. So he had this really wide-ranging interests and was able to focus on them and to be pretty successful in these different fields. Although his life also had plenty of hardships, but I think it's also pretty interesting because he's one of those people who also traveled around the globe, and I don't think there are that many countries that he didn't visit. Everywhere from the middle of Canada to the Himalayas. So that even that as well is pretty fascinating. But his magic, which you can read his books. A lot of it was taken from the Victorian occult order of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and developed from that. But later on, he became enamored of different sexual techniques of magic.
Yeah, the sex magic, right?
Yeah, basically sex magic.
Have you ever partaked in anything like that, by the way? Anytime I talk to someone that's very familiar with the occult, I bring up sex magic, and they're kind of known for that, let's say, and all of a sudden I bring up sex magic, and then they get very shy and quiet about it.
Yeah, I guess it's still a little bit taboo for whatever reason. Maybe it conjures up sort of images of eyes wide shut or something.
Probably.
Yeah, but I mean, I would say that. I mean, there probably are groups out there that are having orgies or whatever, which might be a bit unsavory. But most
It
of the
might not
time,
be safe.
yeah, not safe at all. I wouldn't recommend anyone do anything like that. But and there is a tradition even within Hindu Tantra where there is kind of group sex might not be the right word, but there is this sort of like multiple coupling in one particular ritual. So I mean, so it has some historical basis, but most of the time, sex magic is going to be practiced with your girlfriend or your wife or something like that. So yeah, I've done a little bit of that in the past, but it's not really my main focus. But
Understood.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm glad you admitted something like that to me
Oh,
here.
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
First time. My God.
The other thing, sorry, and then the other thing might be that even with regular sex, so a sex magic technique would be to control your mind at the moment of orgasm instead of it just allowing itself to go haywire. You might want to focus on something specific, at least so that your mind isn't polluted by whatever thoughts, maybe like stress or something.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. You could read more about it, ladies and gentlemen, if you want. All that information is out there. And of course, that brings me to another very special individual by the name of Jack Parsons. I'm sure you're quite familiar with this individual, and he used to, well, let me backtrack. The first guest I had on was Leo Zagami, and he's out there in Palm Springs, California. And of course, Jack Parsons, he stayed out there as well.
Yeah, that's right. And I spoke in Pasadena last year, and I'm going to speak there again this year. And I believe he lived in Pasadena as well.
Did.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested in Jack Parsons. His whole life of Werner von Braun, by the way, he had claimed that it was actually the self-taught Jack Parsons who was the true father of the American space program for his contribution and the development of the solid rocket fuel. And yeah, it's very interesting once you read into that. And of course, you have to think about this. Jack Parsons was very much into Aleister Crowley. He was also a part of the lodge out there in California, the OTO.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's like this guy was self-taught, and it's like, how the hell did he even come to this sort of information?
Yeah.
And then you realize he was a part of the occult. So there's that.
Yeah, and I think going back further in time, I guess he would have been the 1940s or 50s. Yeah, and if you go back to that time, and certainly before that, the people that are involved in the occult, and obviously the occult world is very small at that time, but the people that are involved in it are usually pretty fascinating and pretty successful in different areas. Most of the original Golden Dawn members were, involved with theater or an actress. W.B. Yeats was the Irish poet laureate. I think Bram Stoker was involved for a while. They were really fascinating characters, and I guess you had to be pretty open-minded and able to sort of pursue unusual ideas to be in those groups, and maybe that helped you outside in the world as well.
My goodness. Yeah, I'm sure that all helped plenty. But yes,
Yeah,
Jack Parsons, my God.
yeah,
What a strange cat that was.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even after all these years, it's still kind of a mystery uh, how all these things sort of lined up for him. Even after
yeah,
all these
definitely.
years, yeah, it's a trip. And of course, we haven't even mentioned L. Ron Hubbard, who was another
Yeah.
wild one, my friend. Any take on him?
Yeah, I don't really know much about L. Ron Hubbard, but I mean, I know he ran off with Parsons' girlfriend,
Right, right.
but yeah, but I mean, he seems like a strange character, and obviously he created an empire. I don't know if it's an empire that I would really want to be involved with in any way, but and they seem to be pretty litigious, but he certainly managed to create something that was very powerful. So,
And in terms of extraterrestrial life, where do you stand with that? It seems like now that is sort of a mainstream topic today.
yeah, it's definitely becoming more so. And, as I mentioned, I was interested in that when I was, around 11, 12. And it's something that I started thinking more about recently. And I have to say, I don't really have any final conclusion about what it is. But I definitely don't think it can be just dismissed out of hand. There's definitely something to that.
Yeah, I agree. There's something odd about it. I think this is such a big universe that we live in. We definitely can't be alone.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and who knows what kind of form an extraterrestrial life might actually take. So, and I guess that's debate, right? Whether it's sort of like a flesh and blood aliens, or whether there's some kind of etheric force or some kind of other type of energy that that they've created out of, or some on some other plane or something like that. But I couldn't actually tell you.
All
I
good.
haven't come to that conclusion.
All good, all good. And of course, I'm sure you've been seeing all over the news about the coronavirus that's been sweeping the nation, spreading around all over
Yeah,
the place. What's your take on
yeah.
this? I was just talking to the first guest about this, and we were discussing that this thing was maybe possibly created in a lab.
Yeah, maybe. I really couldn't say, to be honest with you. I mean, lots of very strange things and maybe unethical behavior is going on in that kind of world today. I don't really know, but I would just say that I wouldn't panic about it. Yeah, I mean, as you probably know, every couple of years there's some kind
There's
of
always
virus that's
something.
going to wipe something out. Yeah, wipe
Oh
out
yeah.
mankind, whether it's SARS or chicken flu. But I mean, it could happen, obviously, but right now I wouldn't panic, yeah.
Now we'll just remember how people were before 2012. People thought we were going to get hit with something.
Yeah, that's
A
right.
lot of
Yeah,
people
and I
made
think
money.
it seems like it's part of the human psyche to always think that we're on the edge of the abyss. And maybe we are, but we definitely do like to predict the end of the world a lot
Yeah, we
for
love
whatever
that.
reason.
It's interesting, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
People find it fascinating.
Yeah.
And of course, this leads me back to Jesus really quickly here. You know, you were talking about Hinduism, and anytime I talk to a guest about Jesus, and I mention the alleged stories of his trips to India,
Right,
they
right.
get very angry and they say no, that never happened. Angel, what's your take on that? Did he actually go there?
I don't think so. I could be wrong. I'm not a biblical scholar, but I don't think so. and I don't think that most biblical scholars think he did. I mean, I guess it's possible, but yeah, my take is probably not. But then I'm not hugely interested in Christianity either, and I think a lot of people grow up in Christian households where they kind of want to convert Jesus into their own into a kind of avatar of their own spiritual beliefs,
Right.
and so it becomes really important for them that he did go to India, or that the Knights Templar does have the Holy Grail. And to me, it's actually not that important.
Yeah, I don't think it matters.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't really think it matters, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And of course, you do have a very interesting chapter here, by the way. Or I should say, the section, Man
Yeah.
as Consciousness of God.
Right.
Yeah, I found that quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's in the magician section.
Yeah,
right?
you brought up Carl Jung.
Yeah, yeah. So the basic idea is that man, that God has created man so that he can become conscious of himself through man's consciousness. He needs this. He needs something else to become conscious of him, so that he can have self-consciousness. So that there's a relationship between man and God, as it were. We both need each other, according to Jung, and also to some sort of mystics as well.
Yeah, when were you introduced to Carl?
I've known about him for a long time, and actually, as a kid, I tried to read his book on UFOs, but I don't think it made a lot of sense to me. But
It
yeah,
didn't. Yeah, you're right.
yeah.
It
I
didn't
mean,
make much
maybe
sense.
it would now, but yeah, I started reading him a little more seriously when I was around 17, 18. I read his book on alchemy. And then I didn't really pursue Jung for a long time, but I kind of revisited it over the last few years, especially actually some of his direct disciples, because they're actually a little more lucid than Carl Jung, and kind of explain his ideas in a way that's a little clearer, like Edwin Winger. So they're pretty interesting.
Yeah, as soon as I saw the back of your book and you mentioned archetypes, and I thought, oh, okay, I know where this is going.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I recognized right away, and I thought, okay, this is going to be a pretty fascinating read then. And I was right.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Yeah, this is a very good book for those that want to read something really interesting. And the way you wrote this, I thought was really good. It's straight to the point.
Yeah, I think that's my style. I don't really like to beat around the bush too much. I actually like to say things that are controversial and not worry about it too much. I think that's more interesting.
Definitely. And of course, you are very much into the golden age, it seems.
Right. So you're referring to this idea of ages. So in
Mm-hmm.
Hinduism, there are different ages, or different yugas, as they're called. And the first of these is the Sattva Yuga, which is sometimes referred to as the Golden Age, and then it declined through different ages. And now we're allegedly, according to most authorities, we're in the Iron Age, which is the worst of all ages. And it's the age of rampant materialism and so on. And what's kind of interesting is that if you look at the Hindu description, and then if you look at the ancient Greek poet Hesiod and his description of these ages, or he describes them as different races: a golden race, silver race, bronze race, and then an iron race, which is where you get the idea of the Iron Age and the Golden Age. And also in Norse mythology as well, in the poetic Edda. It describes again these different ages, and there's the final wolf age, and all of them describe a time of conflict, of corrupt individuals being put into positions of power, and men being adored because they had money, and then the family is all broken apart, and you can't trust your siblings or your friends, and it's a time of questionable behavior and cunning and so on, and the community is kind of completely fragmented. And it's pretty interesting that all of these different traditions from quite a wide geographical area would really see the same symptoms as being embodied at the end of the cycle, as it were, and then later a new cycle would begin, a new golden age allegedly. But I think there's quite a bit in those descriptions to say that we're in the Iron Age.
Before,
And
Mhm.
yeah, and one thing I claim in my book is that the rituals of esoteric and initiatic societies are partly a way of getting people to remember the Golden Age, because it reorientates you towards harmony and towards the divine, and away from materialism, and towards your own death, but through death towards God and divinity, as it were.
You know what that reminds me? Speaking of death, since it is the 15th still here in California, this is when Socrates died, I believe,
Oh, is that right?
or when he
Yeah.
was sentenced to death by the city of Athens, by the way, for
Right,
corrupting the
right.
minds of the youth of the city
Yes.
and for impiety. I love
Yeah.
that. My God, how things have changed, and especially when you look at society today. And that's what I wanted to ask you, Angel. Looking at society today, what exactly are your thoughts? This is a very strange period in time where individuals can even lose their livelihood over a baseless allegation, even.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. And even even people tweeting will get somebody fired from their employment. Yeah, it's a completely bizarre time. It really is. Um, yeah, I mean that phenomenon in itself, I don't really know what to say about it, but
It's
it's
strange.
obviously it's very strange, and it's also very dangerous as well, because one thing that you need is creative people, which will help you to overcome whatever obstacles you have in society. But I don't know if you can hear my cat going crazy,
I
but
hear that. Yes, I was going to say, are they breaking into your house?
yeah, it sounds like that. I've got two cats and they're going
What
nuts.
kind of
But
cats do you? What kind of cats are they, by the way? We like cats here sometimes.
oh, very good. Yeah, we have a Russian blue and a Bombay cat, but they've
Oh
decided
shit.
to be
Okay.
very risky at the moment for some reason. So,
Boys or girls?
boy and a girl.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, but yeah, so you need creative people who can overcome these like challenges in society. But the whole of the university and Twitter and social media seems to be trying to corral people into a very limited way of thinking. And you have to explore subjects that are taboo and dangerous if you want to have something new. But everybody is being told that no, you must think only within these very small parameters. And I don't know if you know, everyone knows of IQ, of course, but
Right, right.
along with IQ, there's a CQ, the creative quotient. And IQ has gone up over the last few decades, but CQ has actually gone down. And CQ is actually a better predictor of whether someone will become not only an artist or an author, but whether they'll become an entrepreneur as well. And that's in decline over about the last 4 decades. And you can kind of see this, right? Because if you look back at the 1980s, people were, poor kids in the Bronx were making their own rap music and being creative with breakdance. And pretty much every 10 years before that had some kind of alternative fashion, goth, punk,
Yeah,
or whatever it was. But
especially
and then there's a stop.
especially where you're at in New York.
Yeah, that's right. New York and London,
But
absolutely.
you
But
still see that
now,
right now, actually, New York for sure.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But
Sorry.
but I think now, rather than doing something creative, young people are just going onto Twitter and complaining a lot, and
Yes,
that seems to be the rebellion, and that's kind of dangerous, I think.
I know. Right back in the early '90s, being an anarchist meant something else. Nowadays, it just means you go
Yeah,
on Twitter and bitch.
yeah, basically that's right. And probably in New York, but certainly in London, there was a whole sort of squatting scene with anarchists and this kind of stuff. So yeah, it was definitely very different.
Do you ever miss living in the UK? By the way,
Not really, to be honest with you.
I know,
I like
right?
I like visiting.
I have listeners out there in the UK, and I love them to death for sure. But they
Yeah.
always tell me how awful it is out there.
It's pretty tough because things are very expensive. I mean, things are expensive in New York, but I find that the basic things that you need in London are very expensive. Even traveling on the tube train there it costs a fortune every time I go back, even for a week.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's you're kind of limited in that sense. And I don't know what it's like now because I haven't been there for a couple of decades, but when I was growing up, it was still very much the remnants of a class culture. So you're told that, well, you shouldn't do that or you can't do that. And I find Americans are much more about, well, you can do that or you should do that if it's important to you. And that's actually a much more helpful environment to be in, really.
Now, Angel, we are winding down in time here, and of course, to remind those that are just joining in, you are the author of the book, The 3 Stages of Initiatic Spirituality, Craftsman, Warrior, and Magician. Angel, I wanted you to tell me what would be the most vital piece of information that you put in this book.
Well, I would say, I look at a lot of different esoteric and initiatic traditions, everything from alchemy, Kabbalah, Islamic Neoplatonism, which is hardly known about at all, to the martial arts and various esoteric and spiritual techniques associated with the martial arts, all the way through to modern tantra and sex magic and chaos magic and the positive thinking movement and looking at how to transform the mind and our life. But I would say that altogether, the point really isn't just to collect interesting information on different esoteric and initiatic traditions. It's also the idea of balancing these archetypes within ourselves, both in an initiatic sense, but also in a practical daily sense. So, balancing the craftsman, warrior, and magician. And one thing you can do is take up some kind of practice for the craftsman. Maybe that's art or painting or sculpture, but it could also be making designing custom motorbikes on the weekend or something like that. Or if nothing else, I would say learn to cook and do that, because that's an art as well, and it's one that'll help you to keep you healthy. With the warrior, I always suggest people take up a martial art, learn self-defense. If you can't do that, maybe take up a soft martial arts, or at least go to a gym and work out and get a little stronger. And with the magician, practice some kind of spiritual tradition, meditation every day, this kind of thing. And just to give my routine, my ritual of the day is to work out, do some free weights, and then I would meditate. Usually do some kind of chakra meditation or inner alchemy meditation for about 15 minutes, and then I would read a passage from a book, maybe from a classical text like the Bhagavad Gita or Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and just think about that paragraph or that sentence, and not read more, but just meditate on that for 10 minutes. And that's actually a practice from Christian monasticism. It's called Lectio Divina, and when you do that, you realize that you have a totally different relationship to reading, and you can get many more ideas out of just looking at one paragraph than skimming. So
Very
I think
nice.
that's
Yeah, thank you so much for being a part of the program. I could talk to you for another hour easily. You're
Sure.
extremely fascinating, my friend. But Angel, it's been a great time. I hope you had fun here tonight.
Oh, definitely. And if you ever want me back on, I'd be happy to. Absolutely. It's been great talking with you.
Very awesome, for sure, my friend. Clockwise, I will have to bring you back on here again, and we'll talk more about these things. Thank you so much, Angel.
Absolutely. Sounds good.
I hope
Thank you.
yes, my friend. Hope you have a good one out there in New York.
Absolutely. Have fun.
All right.
Bye for
Mahalo.
now.
Bye-bye. And there he goes, boys and girls. That was Mr. Angel Millar. Definitely go check him out. Go to Amazon and check out his work. And before we pull it down here, I have to address an issue that came about when Jim Fetzer was the guest here. My God, Jim Fetzer messaged me a few days ago, boys and girls, telling me that one of his regular listeners sent him a message about, oh no, yours truly. Oh my. I have that message here. Let me read it to you. This is from James Fetzer, by the way. It goes like this. PM. Stumbled across you at Decon's show Sunday. Very late evening rebroadcast, I assume. I never know his schedule. Last I heard you there was like last September. He talked shit about you later with another guest. Said something like, it's not like I agree with the crazy stuff he says, or something to that regard. I've heard him enough to where he often comes across, or actually, where he often comes off like a prick. My God. I already have addressed Jim, but I'll address this gentleman here. If you were offended with anything I said, you're a bitch. And you trying to cause any sort of trouble is very, very reminiscent of what the cancel culture does. This isn't exactly the kind of behavior that I doubt your political ideology would stand for. It's very hypocritical coming from one of Jim's regular listeners. You most likely misunderstood what I said. And I'm sure you don't get this show, which is okay because this show isn't aimed for your age demographic, I'm quite positive. And of course, I told Jim about all of this before, and if you are offended, you probably are a pussy, and you are a snowflake. Very, very hypocritical. Now, you would be a fool not to be skeptical of everything you hear. Learn discernment. Learn to have a sense of humor. Learn to have balls. Or better yet, don't stay... Actually, better yet, stay where you're at. Stay content where you're at. I should leave it that way. As far as you referring to me as a prick, I prefer the term asshole, and I'm proud to be one. You're fine to think of me in any way you want. It's totally fine. Again, if you are offended, then I have done my job. Grow a pair of balls. Stop being a beta male. That's exactly what you are. Now back to those who aren't completely beta. Thank you to those out there in the chat room too. The international listeners, I appreciate all of you very much for being a part of the program. And of course, if you are a fan of the show and want to help donate, there is a PayPal button over at michaeldecon.com. Or if you want extra bonus content, go to patreon.com/michaeldecon. Yes, that bonus content. It keeps rolling in, and it's quite good, I promise. You can find the podcast rendition of this program on iTunes, Google Play, CastBox, and Stitcher, I believe. You can find this program on any major platform now. And yes, it's been an interesting night. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, boys and girls. And yes, I'm looking at you, Oscar. I agree. Probably drives a $100,000 BMW. He probably does. He probably does. My goodness, it's been a fun show. I do want to thank all of you yet again in the chat room, and those who will listen to a replay of this on whatever network you will catch a replay on. For instance, those on the Fringe FM and those out there in the New York region, the Hudson Valley, listening to this tomorrow. Hello from the future. And of course, my God, those in California, love all of you very much. We'll do this again very soon, boys and girls. Stay safe no matter where you are on this island Earth. I'm Michael Decon, and with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, good night, everybody.
Have you thought of breaking through? Ain't it part of what you do? Catch a victim while he's dumb, break his larynx with your time, and it's time to get high. Well, this ain't no goddamn dream, it's exactly what it seems. Wake up today just to lay back down back. Let's call it a heart attack. Give me some of that knack. This is just a final payback. They all flipped on me, took my passions, left me be. When I had a place to sit, a goddamn attitude to fit. Talk real smooth, knew where to spit. But things have changed and I have quit. Got nothing to look forward to, but a backlash full of lies. You're too late for where you're going. This is fate, the whistle's blowing. It's much too late. It's all too late. You're much too late. Like a piss hole punk with his nose turned up and a fragrance all your own. Tell me what it's like to be alone. And let's not forget the Scarface prick who offers fix to your face. He dropped out of the subhuman race. Sad. Boo-hoo-hoo. But I'm goddamn glad that piece of shit was just a fad. Tell me, boy, where were you? What's your story? I mean, really. Where have you been? Was it the big time and full of sin? Tell me what you saw, chasing dragons down the hall. So now I find you just the same, a generation full of games. I hear the whispers, I see traps to break my legs. Where are you going, boy? Where have you been? You're too late for where you're going. This is fate, the whistle's blowing. It's much too late. It's much too late. You're much too late. You're much too late.